Hi guys. Tonight we are heading north, way north, into the kind of landscape that laughs at your coat, your scarf, and your thermostat. You stand on the edge of a snow-buried mountain pass, the icy breath of winter slapping your cheeks red. Imagine the crunch beneath your boots as you take that first step onto a path that seems more like a death wish than a road. And you know what? You probably won't survive this. Not unless you learn to think like a Viking warrior, trudging through snowdrifts in armor and furs, praying that the gods, or at least your toes, don't abandon you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, hey, drop a comment with your location and your local time. I love knowing where and when you're tuning in. Now, dim the lights. The journey begins. Your breath fogs out in little white clouds that seem almost solid, like smoke leaving a chimney. You pull your cloak tighter. Though it doesn't help much, the wool itches and the fur lining already feels damp. The mountain air slices through layers as if they were tissue paper. Each step forward is an argument with the wind, which insists you should turn back, but you keep walking anyway. Behind you, the line of warriors stretches like a dark snake over the blinding snow, their shields clattering softly in rhythm with their boots. That sound is almost comforting, as if the clank and scrape mean you're not alone in this frozen desert. What strikes you first is how heavy everything feels. Your body isn't just fighting the cold, it's battling gravity. The sword at your hip, the shield slung over your shoulder, even the thick boots designed to keep your feet from freezing, each of them adds to the weight you drag uphill. A mainstream fact about these warriors is that many carried around 30 kilograms of gear on marches like this. Not just weapons, but food, flint, cooking pots, and sometimes even tools to repair their ships. Try lugging that up a snowy slope, and suddenly the cold feels like only half the problem. Yet there's something almost absurd here too. Something that makes you shake your head. Some sources hint that Vikings believed chewing tree bark, yes, actual bark stripped from birch trees, gave them a little energy boost. Imagine gnawing on a stick like a frozen beaver just to keep moving. Still, you see men tearing at strips of bark with frost-cracked teeth, desperate for anything to distract them from the biting air. And while some details are known, others remain uncertain. Scholars still question whether these men truly prepared for such expeditions with careful planning, or if they simply threw themselves into the snowstorm with a shrug and a prayer. Did they stockpile furs and salted meat weeks in advance, or was survival more about improvisation, grabbing whatever the land and sheer stubbornness could provide along the way? The answer is buried beneath centuries of drifting snow. Your senses sharpen in this landscape. The snow isn't silent as people imagine. It squeaks and sighs beneath your boots, while gusts of wind whistle through the rocks like ghostly flutes. The air tastes of iron, cold and metallic, and when you draw it too quickly, it stings the back of your throat. Your nose is already raw, crusted at the edges, and you can feel little icicles forming on the hairs of your beard or lashes. One of your comrades curses softly, the sound muffled by the scarf wrapped around his mouth. Another chuckles grimly, a kind of gallows humor that keeps despair from sinking in. In your hand, the haft of an axe grows slick with condensation from your own grip. The wood is smooth, polished by use, and now almost dangerously slippery. You keep shifting it from one glove to another, trying to keep your fingers from freezing stiff. The gloves themselves, goat hide lined with wool, smell faintly of smoke and sweat, reminders of warmer nights by the hearth. That smell is almost intoxicating here, surrounded by the sterile sharpness of snow. You glance ahead and see the leader raising his arm. The column halts. Everyone bends slightly forward, shoulders heaving, their breath pouring out in unison like a single giant beast panting in the cold. Silence falls except for the wind. You realize just how alone you are. No villages nearby, no inns to duck into, no kindly strangers with warm soup, just mountains, snow, and a relentless march. The eerie part? This isn't even the worst of it. This is only the greeting card version of winter. Deeper into the mountains, the real tests await. Avalanches, frozen rivers, and storms that bury entire trails. For now, though, you're simply learning what it means to survive the introduction, the first icy handshake of a Viking winter. You lift your boot, slam it down into the snow, and feel the crust collapse under your weight. The march continues. Shields clink again, voices murmur, and you step forward, knowing that every crunch, every frosty breath, and every shiver is the beginning of a long night's tale. The march resumes, and with it comes the steady, hypnotic rhythm of boots striking snow. Each crunch sounds the same, yet each feels heavier than the last. You notice how the world around you has narrowed. It is nothing but white in every direction, a blizzard, painted canvas where sky and earth blur into one relentless sheet. Somewhere in that canvas you imagine a horizon, but it's impossible to tell where it begins. You walk as if inside a dream, the kind where you keep trudging but never get closer to the end. The snow isn't fluffy here. It's hard-packed, crusted by wind, so your boots sometimes sink just enough to make the calves burn. Other times the snow gives way entirely, and you stumble knee-deep, cursing as you drag yourself out. The man behind you nearly collides, muttering a half-laugh, half-growl, because one stumble risks toppling a whole chain of warriors like dominoes. The shields clatter louder in such moments, an accidental percussion that echoes through the mountain valley. Here's a truth that historians have confirmed. Viking warriors were no strangers to marching in such harsh terrain. Contemporary chronicles describe their campaigns across mountain passes in Norway, Sweden, and even Scotland. They weren't just sea raiders. They were mountain crossers too, often traveling miles through waste, deep snow to ambush settlements or join distant allies. Think about it when we imagine Vikings. We picture ships and fjords, but much of their survival depended on these exhausting inland marches. And then, tucked in with that sober fact, comes a quirk. Some warriors are said to have tied leather, wrapped bones beneath their feet to glide over icy surfaces, primitive skates of a sort. You catch yourself smirking at the thought of bearded men skating down a frozen slope like children, blades scraping against the ice while they grip their shields for balance. It sounds absurd, almost comical, yet it's part of the strange toolkit that kept them moving. Still, not all the evidence is crystal clear. Scholars remain divided on whether the Vikings relied heavily on such improvisations or if those tales were exaggerations from later storytellers. Did every warrior strap bones to his feet? Or was it just an odd custom in certain villages? No one can quite pin down the truth. What you do know is that in this cold, you'd gladly tie kitchen spoons to your boots if it meant sliding instead of sinking. The soundscape of the march becomes its own kind of torture. You hear the steady rasp of breath, the occasional cough that turns into hacking, the hollow clunk of an axe halved against a shield. And, strangely, you hear the snow itself. The layers shift and groan beneath the weight of dozens of warriors as though the mountain keeps whispering, testing how much it can bear before something gives way. Your senses betray you too. The glare of snow under a pale sun burns your eyes, making you squint until your head aches. A few men tie strips of cloth across their faces as makeshift snow goggles, little more than slits to reduce the whiteout. You blink and see phantom colors swimming in the brightness, ghostly blues and purples that remind you of stained glass, but here there are no churches, just snowfields and endless sky. The smell is different now. It isn't just the crisp, metallic cold. It's sweat seeping through wool, the faint tang of leather, and the sharp scent of pine resin carried from forests far below. Every inhale feels like swallowing needles, but somehow you grow accustomed to it. Your tongue even tastes the air, dry, bitter, and strange, as though each breath carries flecks of stone scraped from the mountain itself. You glance at the man trudging beside you. His beard is white with frost, stiff and sparkling in the pale light, as if he's wearing jewels of ice. He grins at you, teeth flashing, and then spits into the snow. The spit freezes almost instantly, a tiny, glossy bead that catches the light before vanishing under the next boot step. That little act is both absurd and defiant, as if to say, I still have warmth to waste. The leader signals again, pointing at a ridge ahead. The slope rises steeply, and you groan inside, knowing what that means. The higher you climb, the sharper the wind becomes. It whistles now, whipping cloaks into snapping banners and rattling shield straps so hard they sting your arms. Your ears ache, your cheeks go numb, and even your hair feels frozen. You can't tell if your eyelashes are stiff from frost or simply too tired to lift. Yet the march continues. Each step is less about strength and more about rhythm, a mantra of movement. You find yourself humming softly, not even words, just a tone that keeps your pace steady. Others pick it up, and soon a ragged chant flows through the line, not cheerful but grounding. It's the kind of sound that tells the mountain, we're still here. You realize, with a mixture of awe and dread, that this is only the second stage of the journey. The crunch of snow, the aching calves, the icy beards, these are just the opening verses of a long saga. Ahead lie nights of fire, frostbite, and fear. But for now, you keep walking, boots sinking, shields clinking, and voices humming into the void. You tug the cloak tighter, but the fabric only scratches your neck and shoulders, as if the wool itself resents being asked to keep you warm. That's the reality here. Every layer is both salvation and irritation. The furs itch, the wool chafes, the leather stiffens in the cold until it feels like you're wearing a suit of bark. Yet without these layers, you'd already be a frozen sculpture on the roadside. Animal pelts are the most valuable shield you have against this chill. You run your hand over the wolf skin draped across your chest, feeling its coarse guard hairs still bristling, as if the animal itself remembers the fight. Mainstream historical accounts mention that Viking warriors often lined themselves in wolf or bear pelts, not just for warmth but for symbolism, slipping into the guise of the beast they admired. There's a strange comfort in thinking you are wrapped in the spirit of something that once thrived in this same cold. Still, there are details that border on the comical. Some sagas describe warriors wearing layers of woolen undergarments, so thick that they waddled like children in snowsuits. Others hint that the poor among them stuffed moss or hay inside their cloaks to trap heat. Picture that for a moment. Fierce raiders padded with barn fodder, rustling like scarecrows every time they moved. You almost laugh when you shift your weight and imagine the squeak of dry grass under your tunic. But historians are not unanimous about just how uniform these methods were. Some argue that the wealthier warriors could afford finely woven cloaks dyed in rich colors, while others trudged through winter half-clothed, barely holding together the scraps of garments they owned. Were the iconic images of well-dressed fur-clad Vikings true for everyone, or mostly a privilege of the elite? The debate continues, lingering like the wind against your face. That wind finds every gap. No matter how tightly you pull your furs, icy fingers slip through seams and cuffs, probing your ribs and ankles. You feel it under your arms, around your neck, sneaking down your boots. The sensation is maddening, like an invisible hand testing your defenses, whispering, "You can't hide from me." You stamp your feet harder, trying to warm the blood, though each stomp sinks deeper into snow. The smell of the furs is its own story. Some still carry the musk of the animal, earthy and pungent, a reminder that these garments once had teeth and claws. Others reek faintly of smoke, cured and dried by the hearth fires back home. That smell is oddly comforting. It feels like carrying a little piece of the hall with you into the wilderness. The wool, however, holds on to sweat. It grows damp quickly, and when the wind cuts through, that dampness becomes a chilling curse. Around you, the men mutter. One scratches furiously at his neck, tearing at the collar of his tunic. Another adjusts the laces of his boots, pulling them tighter in a futile attempt to block the cold. You catch sight of one warrior whose cloak is little more than stitched rabbit skins, thin and tattered, yet he trudges forward without complaint. Maybe he's too tired to complain. Maybe he's already numb. You think about the irony. All this layering, yet you still feel naked. The cold doesn't care how many skins you stack. It gnaws at bones, seeping through everything. You remember the warmth of summer fields, the feel of sun on bare shoulders, and wonder how such a thing could exist in the same world as this. It seems impossible now, a fantasy dreamt by warmer people. And then, in the rhythm of your thoughts, comes a sensory jolt. The wool against your wrists has frozen stiff little icy ridges pressing into your skin like needles. When you bend your arms, the fabric cracks faintly, like parchment breaking. You rub your hands together, trying to soften the stiffness, but all you achieve is friction that stings. Someone behind you coughs violently, muffled by a fur collar. The sound rattles through the air, harsh and human in the midst of this inhuman cold. Another warrior chuckles at the noise, shaking his head. "At least you'll keep us awake," he mutters, voice wrapped in sarcasm. Humor becomes armor here, laughter as essential as wool. Every breath fogs against the layers covering your mouth, freezing into tiny frost crystals on the fabric. You taste the wool fibers when you inhale too sharply, dry and bitter, like chewing a sheep. Yet you cling to that scratchy mouth cover, because without it the wind would slice into your lungs raw. You can't help but reflect. Each pelt, each strip of cloth, is a small contract between you and survival. It may itch, it may smell, but it keeps you breathing. And in this frozen theatre, breathing is the most precious luxury of all. You shift the wolf fur again, the itch against your skin becoming part of the march's rhythm. Crunch of snow, rasp of fabric, whisper of wind, all of it blends together as you push further into the heart of winter. The light fades quickly in these mountains. One moment you are squinting at the glare of snow, and the next you are fumbling in twilight, watching the horizon swallow the last pale strip of sun. The cold deepens instantly, as if night itself is another enemy you must fight. You keep marching until the leader finally raises a hand. The line halts, shields clatter into the snow, and you realize with relief it is time to make fire. The camp spreads in a slow rhythm, warriors moving like weary ants. Some kneel to clear snow down to the earth, scraping until patches of brown soil peek through the white. Others fumble with flint and steel, sparks flying into the brittle air. You squat close, breath held, watching tiny glimmers catch on dry moss and bark. It is absurdly fragile, the hope of dozens of men resting on a spark no larger than a firefly. When at last a flame licks upward, cheers ripple softly. The fire cracks, spits, and grows into a small but defiant blaze. You hold out your hands, letting the heat sting your frozen skin. It hurts at first, like needles poking into your fingers, but soon the pain dulls into a warmth so sweet it makes you sigh. A mainstream fact is that Vikings often carried iron fire strikers and tinderboxes with them on campaign, knowing fire was as essential as their swords. Without flame, there would be no thawed water, no cooked food, no survival. And yet, in the shadows of history, quirks surface. Some sagas claim warriors roasted fish on sticks by the flames, but others hint at stranger meals. Snow hares cooked whole with fur singed away, or even chunks of seal fat sizzling like greasy candles. Imagine the smell, oily smoke clinging to beards, the taste lingering long after hunger is satisfied. You wrinkle your nose, though your stomach growls anyway. Of course, scholars continue to argue about how well provisioned such expeditions really were. Did the warriors march with carefully dried rations, or did they scavenge whatever the frozen land surrendered each night? Some researchers suggest that what we picture as organized camps were often messy. Improvisations, fires too small, food too scarce, warmth fleeting at best. That debate hangs heavy here, as your fire flickers small against the vast dark. The flames snap, and sparks drift upward, glowing like tiny stars before winking out. Around the fire, men pull off damp boots and hold them close, steam rising from leather as if the boots themselves are sighing. The smell is sharp, wet wool, sweat, and smoke mixing into a stew of survival. A few warriors laugh at the absurdity of drying socks over a spear shaft, socks stiff enough to stand upright on their own. You chuckle with them, because laughter makes the night shorter. You skewer a strip of dried fish, holding it over the flame. The flesh curls, browns, and drips a little fat into the fire, sending up a hiss of smoke. The taste is salty, tough, but compared to chewing frozen bark earlier, it feels like a feast. You chew slowly, savoring, pretending that you are back in a warm hall with music instead of out here in the snow with wolves howling in the distance. The fire gives not only heat but sound. It crackles steadily, filling the silence with a rhythm that eases your mind. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The hiss of sap bursting in wood, the murmur of voices, the occasional laugh, all of it softens the brutal edges of the mountain night. Still, the cold is never far. When you lean back, you feel the icy breath of the world closing in. Step away from the circle of flame and the darkness presses hard, swallowing warmth whole. You realize that this small fire is less a comfort and more a fragile truce with the wilderness. It will keep you alive tonight, but only if you guard it, feed it, protect it from the wind that wants to snuff it out. You rub your hands again, the fur at your cuffs, scorched faintly from getting too close. The smoke clings to you, seeping into every thread of your clothing, so that even when you leave, you will carry this camp with you. That smell is more than memory. It is survival tattooed onto your very skin. Around you, men begin to settle, some lying with shields at their sides, others huddling close to one another. The fire burns on, casting flickering shadows across tired faces. You watch the flames dance and realize this is the first time all day you have stopped moving. The stillness feels foreign, fragile, but it is enough. The night is cold, the mountains cruel, yet for a few hours you have fire, you have warmth, and you have each other. The fire dwindles as the night drags on, and when morning comes, it leaves behind little more than smoke curling up through pale air. You wake with stiff limbs, joints creaking like old wood, and a crust of frost clinging to the edges of your cloak. Your breath plumes out thickly, the only movement in a landscape that feels frozen solid. Thirst gnaws at you before hunger does. Water, where will it come from in a world made of ice? You kneel, scoop a handful of snow, and bring it to your mouth. It crunches between your teeth, so cold it makes your gums ache. It melts slowly, dribbling down your throat, but it's not satisfying. It's like chewing on emptiness that hurts. You remember the warnings. Never eat snow straight from the ground for too long because it leaches your body heat faster than you can afford to lose it. A mainstream fact. Viking travelers often melted snow or ice in iron pots suspended over fires, mixing it with herbs or even broth when they could, turning thin water into something warm enough to sustain them. But here, there is no pot ready, no fire lit yet, and you are impatient. You chew anyway, just to quiet the dryness in your mouth. Around you, others do the same, spitting out grit when they scoop from the wrong patch. The snow has a faint mineral taste, clean but also metallic, as if you're licking the mountain itself. And then comes the stranger part, the quirks of survival that don't always make sense. Some stories tell of warriors storing snow in their leather pouches, holding it close to their bodies so it would melt into drinkable water. Imagine that, walking with a bag of cold slush pressed to your chest, leaking into your tunic, in hopes of sipping a few drops later. Absurd? Maybe. But when you're thirsty, absurdity becomes wisdom. Of course, historians still debate whether the Vikings really carried snow this way, or whether such details are exaggerated by later storytellers fascinated with the brutality of the North. Was it a regular practice, or a desperate measure in only the harshest winters? No one can say for certain, because evidence is fleeting, melted away like the very snow in question. Your lips sting, cracked from dryness. You run your tongue over them and taste blood. The metallic tang mixes with the sharp chill of the snow, and for a moment it feels as though you're sipping iron. The ache in your teeth deepens, each nerve lit up by the icy shock. You shake your head, groaning softly, and spit out the last chunk before it numbs you further. The group begins the ritual of lighting morning fires. Flint strikes steel, sparks leap, and the familiar hiss of melting snow in pots fills the camp. The sound is oddly soothing, like tiny sighs as water becomes liquid again. You hold a cup fashioned from horn, waiting, eager. When at last the melted snow is poured in, steaming faintly, you clutch it tight, savoring the warmth seeping through to your palms. You sip carefully, the heat burning your tongue in contrast to the cold ache of moments before. It's thin, it's bland, but it feels like luxury. Around you, men joke in low voices. One pretends to toast with his horn, declaring the snow water to be finer than any mead in Denmark. Laughter ripples through the camp, tired but real. Humor becomes seasoning, flavoring a drink that otherwise tastes of nothing but survival. The sensory details overwhelm you here. The steam curls against your face, softening the sting of icy wind. The smell is faint, barely more than damp air, yet compared to the sharp scent of frost and leather, it feels refreshing. The warmth travels slowly down your chest, pooling in your belly like a candle's glow. For the first time in hours, you feel something inside thaw. It's easy to forget that water, simple as it seems, is a lifeline harder to secure than food in these conditions. You can go without bread for days, but without water, your body falters quickly. And so, each morning begins with this ritual: melt, sip, survive. You wipe your lips with the back of your glove, feeling the crust of frost crack against the fur. You look at the pot, steam drifting upward, and realize how much of this march depends not on strength or steel, but on patience waiting for snow to turn to water, for fire to turn to heat, for night to turn to day. Each drop is earned, and each drop keeps you moving one more step through the mountains. The march begins again, and this time the weight feels unbearable. Yesterday you thought you understood heaviness, but now you discover a new definition, one born of iron and exhaustion. The axe strapped to your back pulls on your shoulders like an anchor. The sword at your hip slaps against your thigh, bruising with every step. And the shield, oh, the shield is a constant reminder that war is not just about battle, but about dragging a slab of wood and iron across miles of unforgiving snow. A mainstream fact stands out here. Viking shields were often about 80 to 90 centimeters in diameter, made of planks of fir or pine, rimmed with leather, and reinforced with an iron boss at the center. Light compared to some medieval designs, yet still a solid burden when carried day after day. Imagine holding a wooden door against your body as you climb mountains. That's what it feels like. The leather straps dig into your shoulder. You shift them constantly, but the weight always returns, biting down like an unkind hand. Your arms ache even before you've lifted the shield in defense. You try to adjust the sword belt at your hip, but the leather has stiffened in the cold. The buckle groans as if it too resents the strain. And then there's the absurdity. Some sagas mention warriors using their shields as sleds. When snowbanks became too steep, they supposedly sat on them, sliding down with wild cries, iron bosses scraping sparks on hidden rocks. It sounds almost childish, like raiders playing at winter games, but you picture it anyway. A line of armored men whooping down a slope on round wooden discs. You nearly laugh at the thought, though you wonder if their shields cracked in half by the end of it. Not every detail of these burdens is agreed upon. Scholars still question whether the average warrior truly carried all his arms and armor at once during long treks, or if some gear was hauled by pack horses or thralls following behind. Were men like you always stooped under full weight? Or did they sometimes walk lighter, saving their strength for battle? The historical record remains a blur, a debate with no resolution in sight. Yet your body tells you that in this moment, everything is on you. The straps bite deeper, and the muscles in your shoulders throb with each jarring step. You feel the ache creep down your spine, into your lower back, and across your hips. It's a slow spread of fire, burning hotter than the frost. Every step turns into negotiation. Can you take another without stopping? Can you pretend the pain doesn't exist? The snow complicates things further. Each time your boots sink, you must yank the weight upward. It's like climbing stairs endlessly, with iron tied to your limbs. The shield edge bangs against your knee. The axe haft rattles with every movement. You curse softly, though the sound is whipped away by the wind. Around you, others suffer too. You see one man shift his shield to his front, hugging it like a barrel as he walks, his arms trembling. Another drags the edge of his shield through the snow, leaving a long groove behind him. You hear the scrape and think of sleds again, though there is nothing playful in his face. Your fingers throb where they grip the straps. You can't feel the tips anymore, only the dull ache of pressure. The leather stiffens with frost, edges biting into your palms like knives. You know that if you stop moving, the blood will pool sluggish, and soon you'll lose all sensation. You flex your fingers, rub them against the fur lining of your cloak, then grip again. The cycle repeats endlessly. Grip, numbness, release, rub, grip. The sensory world is brutal. The snow squeaks under the extra weight, high-pitched and mocking. Your breath rasps loudly inside the scarf covering your mouth, the sound amplified as if you're listening to your own lungs struggle. The iron fittings of your gear click and clank with every jolt, a grim symphony of survival. Even the smell is oppressive, sweat trapped under furs, iron's sharp tang, and the faint scent of oil used to keep weapons from rusting. That oil, once reassuring, now feels cloying, thick in your nose as though you are inhaling tar. Despite the misery, small acts of adaptation surface. One warrior ties his sword hilt to his belt with rope, so it stops slapping his thigh. Another wedges a folded scrap of wool under his shield strap to ease the pressure on his shoulder. These little adjustments make the march bearable. You take note, copying where you can, grateful for any hint of relief. And then the mountain mocks you further. The trail steepens, and suddenly every burden doubles. Your shield slides against your back, threatening to topple you backward with each step. You lean forward, nearly crawling, arms pumping like pistons. The snow beneath your boots collapses, so each gain feels stolen. Sweat breaks out despite the cold, soaking the wool under your cloak. You feel it freeze almost instantly, skin prickling with icy needles. Someone behind you mutters a curse in a tongue you don't fully know, but the sentiment is universal. A grunt, a groan, the sound of another man falling. Shields clatter, swords scrape, and the line halts. For a moment, you fear a collapse, that the weight of 30 men will tumble into one heap. But they recover, dragging themselves upright, and the march lurches forward again. The absurd part? Even in this misery, pride matters. A man may stagger, but he will not willingly drop his shield. To leave it behind is shame, a betrayal of the warband. Better to break your back than admit weakness. You clutch yours tighter, telling yourself the same thing. You will not be the one who lets go. Your thoughts drift, as they often do when exhaustion dulls the senses. You imagine home, the feel of bare arms unburdened, the sound of children playing by the fire, the simple luxury of walking without iron clanging at your sides. The memory fuels you, even as the weight drags you lower. You pause briefly, just long enough to hitch the shield higher, shift the sword belt, wipe frost from your lashes. The mountain looms ahead, indifferent, daring you to continue. You know that if you drop everything here, if you abandon your burden, the march will move on without you. You would be left in the snow, forgotten. And so you step forward again, bent, aching, stubborn. Each crunch of snow beneath your boots is a victory. Each clatter of iron is proof you still move. And though the weight feels endless, you understand something profound. Survival is not about comfort. It is about carrying what must be carried, no matter how heavy, no matter how cruel. The burden is the price of life, and for now, you are still paying. The march continues, and today's trial isn't hunger or thirst, it's the sheer logistics of food. You glance at the sacks slung across your shoulder, heavier than any luxury, yet lighter than life itself. Inside lie the dry, stubborn provisions that keep you moving when the land offers nothing but snow and rock. Contemporary accounts confirm that Viking travelers relied heavily on preserved food during expeditions. Dried fish was a staple, beaten flat and tough as leather, along with barley cakes baked hard enough to survive months. You tear off a strip now, chewing slowly, jaw aching from the effort. It tastes of salt and smoke, the kind of flavor that clings to your tongue long after you've swallowed. But there are stranger stories hidden in the record. A curious detail survives in some sources. Warriors sometimes carried sour milk or curdled whey sealed in skins. It sounds almost revolting, yet the lactic tang gave both hydration and energy. Picture yourself sipping a pouch of half-rotten milk in the middle of a blizzard, and suddenly the dry barley cake doesn't seem so bad. You sniff at the thought, shaking your head at what people will tolerate just to stay alive. Researchers remain divided over how well organized these food supplies truly were. Did every band of warriors march with carefully rationed packs? Or was much of it improvised, grabbing whatever bread, cheese, or smoked meat they could before setting off? Some argue that only the wealthier leaders had access to the best rations, while poorer fighters survived on scraps and luck. The truth likely lies somewhere between, drifting with the smoke of forgotten campfires. The sounds of food preparation are muted but distinct. You hear the scrape of knives against frozen bread, the crack of dried meat snapping, the soft slosh of liquid poured from skin flasks. Each sound feels intimate, a reminder that even hardened warriors must still eat like anyone else. The smells are sharper here too. Dried fish pungent enough to wrinkle noses, bread sour with age, a faint must of leather pouches soaked with milk. It isn't a feast, it's survival dressed in crumbs. The texture overwhelms your senses. Bread cracks beneath your teeth, sharp enough to cut your gums. Dried meat resists like rope, pulling at your jaw until it softens. You think of the warm stews back home, thick with onion and herbs, and nearly laugh at the absurdity. Here, a chunk of barley cake feels like a banquet. The weight of food is another irony. It keeps you alive, but it drags at your back with every step. You shift the sack, trying to balance it with your shield, though nothing really helps. Each bite you take is a double-edged act. You lighten the load, yes, but you also remind yourself how limited the supply island. Every piece chewed is one less for tomorrow. You glance at your comrades. One gnaws noisily at dried herring, eyes closed in weary satisfaction. Another dips hard bread in melted snow water to soften it, letting it crumble into mush before swallowing. A third carefully hoards a small piece of cheese, nibbling only enough to taste. Hunger has its rituals, and each man invents his own. There is even a faint rhythm to it all, the crunch of snow beneath boots, followed by the crunch of bread between teeth, then the gulp of thin water. Marching and eating blend into the same act, both necessary, both exhausting. And so you keep chewing, step after step, bite after bite, knowing that these meager provisions are what stand between you and collapse. It's not glorious, it's not romantic, but it's survival, and that is glory enough in these mountains. The march stretches into a white blur, and soon you realize the land itself is your enemy. The mountains are vast, their slopes treacherous, and the snow covers everything, disguising even the path underfoot. You try to spot familiar shapes, but the landscape repeats itself ridge after ridge, drift after drift, until you can't tell whether you've moved forward at all. One thing widely accepted among historians is that Viking warriors were adept at using the natural world for navigation. Stars guided them at night, just as they did at sea, and in daylight they relied on the sun's arc, the shapes of mountains, and even the patterns of moss on rocks to steer their way. You tilt your head, studying a patch of green clinging stubbornly to stone, and take comfort in the knowledge that you are not walking in circles. And then comes the strange, almost folkloric detail. Some accounts mention that ravens were carried as living compasses. Warriors released the birds to see where they flew, trusting them to find land or the nearest valley. You imagine it now, a raven flapping into the grey sky, its black wings cutting through the storm, while dozens of men wait below, deciding their fates based on its choice of flight. There is something both brilliant and absurd in that reliance. The scholarly debate lingers on whether these stories of ravens in land travel are literal or symbolic. Were the birds actually tethered and released like scouts, or was the raven more a poetic emblem, representing intuition and the favour of Odin? Evidence is too scarce to settle the question, leaving you to wonder as you squint into the wind. The snow plays tricks on your senses. It blinds your eyes with glare one moment and cloaks the world in shadow the next. You stumble often, not just from exhaustion but from disorientation, as though the ground itself keeps shifting under your feet. The sound of the wind is constant, yet deceptive. It roars in your ears, then drops suddenly into silence, leaving you dizzy. You taste the cold, metallic and sharp, every breath like biting down on iron. Your tongue feels swollen in your mouth, lips numb and cracked. You pull your scarf higher, but it's already crusted stiff with frost, so you breathe through tiny gaps, each inhale a rasp. The march feels endless because distance is meaningless here. Without markers, you have no sense of progress. A ridge looms ahead, and you climb, certain that a valley lies beyond, but at the crest, you see only another ridge, another endless slope. The men groan softly, curses drifting like smoke, but no one stops. To stop is to die. You keep your eyes on the small details, a bent tree branch half buried in snow, the faint print of a hare darting across the slope, the flicker of stars when clouds part briefly. These fragments become your map, the puzzle pieces that guide you through the blank canvas. Someone points upward, and you follow his gaze. The sky has cleared just enough to reveal the faint line of the North Star. Relief washes through the group, subtle but real. You hear murmurs of thanks, some whispered to gods, others muttered in weary voices. For a moment, you feel steadier, as if the stars themselves have bent down to guide your steps. But the cold soon reminds you that stars cannot warm your bones. You trudge forward again, shield heavy, breath ragged, and realize that the true skill of Viking navigation was not just reading the sky or the land. It was enduring the endless uncertainty, marching when the world itself seemed to vanish, and trusting that even in a land of white silence, there was always a way through. The march grows quieter as the slope narrows, and then a sound breaks the stillness, a deep rumble, low and menacing, rolling across the valley. You freeze. Everyone freezes. The noise grows louder, as though the mountain itself has taken a breath. An avalanche is the one enemy you can't fight with steel, and you know it. What records make clear is that winter marches were always shadowed by the threat of avalanches. The combination of heavy snow, shifting winds, and human footsteps could trigger walls of ice to collapse without warning. You imagine a white wave crashing down, burying men and gear alike in an instant. There are no second chances when the mountain decides to move. Then comes a curious note from oral tradition. Some say warriors tapped their shields or shouted loudly in certain valleys, believing noise would awaken the snow and bring the danger sooner, before they were caught deeper in its path. The logic feels questionable. You picture bearded men yelling at the cliffs as if challenging them to fight, but the very act of defiance seems fitting. Better to provoke fate than to be taken by surprise. Specialists continue to disagree on how cautious the Vikings truly were with avalanches. Did they understand the science of snowpack, or did they simply charge ahead, trusting to luck and the gods? Some argue they learned from experience, avoiding certain slopes, while others suggest the risks were accepted as inevitable. You find yourself wondering which group you would belong to, the careful or the reckless. The rumble fades. Relief trickles through your veins, though your heart still thumps hard. The silence that follows feels louder than the noise, as if the whole mountain holds its breath with you. You realize you've been clutching your shield too tightly, knuckles stiff and pale. The sensory world sharpens in fear. The snow beneath your boots groans louder now, every step a question. Will this be the one that tips the balance? Your ears strain for more rumbles. Your eyes dart to the ridges above, watching for the slightest drift. Even the wind carries new meaning. It whispers, hisses, rattles, as though it might be the signal of snow shifting higher up. You taste bile at the back of your throat, the sharp tang of fear mixed with the metallic cold. Your mouth has gone dry, though snow surrounds you in abundance. You resist the urge to scoop it up. Instead, you press your lips tightly, holding your breath whenever you hear a crack or a sigh in the distance. The men march slower now, deliberate and quiet. Shields no longer clatter. Swords are held close to minimize noise. It feels like a funeral procession, moving with respect through the mountain's territory. One man slips and falls, and the entire line freezes again, listening. Nothing follows but silence. He rises, pale-faced, and continues. You glance upward often, unable to stop yourself. The ridges are steep, hung with heavy drifts like the edges of a roof after a storm. They look harmless, almost beautiful, glowing faintly in the dim light. But you know beauty can kill. You remember stories of whole bands swallowed in an instant, their banners buried, their names lost. When the path bends into a gentler slope, you finally allow yourself to exhale. The danger is never gone, but it feels farther away. A ripple of relief moves through the group. Men relax their grips, shoulders drop slightly. Some even mutter jokes, dark humor returning now that the threat has passed. You realize this is the rhythm of survival in the mountains. Fear and relief, tension and release. The avalanches may never come, but the threat shapes every step you take. You march not just against cold and hunger, but against the invisible weight of snow hanging above you, waiting for the right moment to fall. The march halts at the edge of a frozen river, a glittering sheet stretching across the valley like a trap disguised as glass. You peer at it, unsure whether it will carry you or swallow you whole. The current beneath, invisible but relentless, hums in your imagination. A wrong step could mean plunging through into black water colder than death. Archaeological finds suggest strongly that Viking warriors often faced such crossings in winter campaigns. Ice was not merely an obstacle but a gateway, shortcuts across valleys, frozen bridges linking places that in summer would take days to travel around. To ignore these rivers was to waste time and energy, yet to trust them was to gamble lives. Stranger still, a few accounts claim that shields were repurposed as sleds for these moments. Warriors laid them flat, placed gear on top, and pushed across, sliding cautiously over the surface. It's almost comic to picture, hardened raiders creeping like children on makeshift toys. But you understand the logic: less weight on one patch of ice, more chance to spread the risk. Academics have not reached consensus about how successful such methods truly were. Some suggest the shield as sled practice was a rare improvisation, more legend than routine. Others argue it was common sense, a practical way to transport burdens quickly. The debate continues, leaving you with only the sound of your own heartbeat to decide whether to try it. You kneel and press your glove against the ice. It groans faintly, a low moan that vibrates up your arm. The surface is hard, smooth, almost beautiful in the pale light, but beauty has lied before. You imagine stepping forward, hearing the crack, feeling the sudden drop. The thought makes your stomach churn. Around you, men test the surface. One taps with his spear shaft, listening for hollowness. Another crouches, pressing an ear to the ice as though listening for secrets. The sounds they hear determine fate. Will the river allow passage today? The air tastes sharper here, filled with the scent of wet stone and pine carried from downstream. The cold wind bites harder, sweeping across the open valley, slicing through furs and wool. You pull your cloak tighter, though it feels more like a gesture of hope than of warmth. A man edges forward. His boots creak. The ice shudders, but it holds. Slowly, carefully, the others follow, one at a time. You place your foot on the surface and feel the world shift under you. The ice sighs, a sound that makes your chest tighten. You shuffle forward, steps short, shield held high as if it could save you from drowning. Every sense is heightened. The crunch of snow is gone, replaced by eerie silence. The river feels alive, humming beneath your feet, whispering temptations. The smell of cold water rises, raw and mineral. Your breath fogs so thick it blurs your vision, and you taste fear, bitter and sour, at the back of your tongue. Halfway across, a crack splits the air. Everyone stops. The sound echoes like thunder, sharp and merciless. Your heart races. You look down, searching for the fracture, but see only hairline lines vanishing into the shadows below. Someone mutters a prayer, voice trembling. The silence after is unbearable. Then the leader signals, "Keep moving." Slowly, the group edges onward, the ice groaning but holding. When at last you step onto solid ground, relief floods your veins. You exhale shakily, realizing you've been holding your breath for far too long. Behind you, the frozen river lies quiet again, as if mocking your fear. You know better, though. The ice is never a friend, it is a temporary ally, loyal only until it decides not to be. The cold is not content with freezing your fingers and toes. Now it takes aim at your very breath. Each inhalation feels like swallowing knives, the air sharp enough to sting deep in your chest. Your nose is so numb you're unsure if it's still attached. And every time you exhale, your beard grows heavier, stiff with frost. The mountain doesn't just chill you, it reshapes you into something brittle and alien. It's well established that Viking warriors grew accustomed to these extremes. Written sources and archaeological evidence alike describe how men marched in winter with their beards and brows turned white with ice, their hair stiff, as if carved from wood. They treated it not as calamity but as proof of endurance. A frozen beard became a badge, a silent announcement that you had stood against the wind and not faltered. There's an odd note in folklore, though. Some tales mention warriors deliberately smearing fat or tallow across their faces before setting out, believing it would keep frost from biting too deep. You picture a line of men with shining cheeks, glistening as though oiled for battle, trudging up a snowy ridge. It borders on comical, yet the idea holds sense. The fat would trap heat and block some of the sting. But specialists continue to disagree on whether this was widespread practice or only a trick used in isolated communities. Was it a clever adaptation lost in the sagas, or a storyteller's embellishment added for colour? The question remains open, swirling like the wind itself, refusing to settle. The sensory world here is merciless. Every gust whistles through the rocks, shrill and cutting. The sound is relentless, like 1,000 tiny flutes screaming at once. Your ears ache despite being wrapped in wool, and when you touch them, they feel wooden, unresponsive. Even your breath betrays you inside the scarf across your face. The moisture freezes, stiffening the fabric until it scratches like sandpaper against your lips. The smell of the air is sharp and metallic, like biting down on iron. You taste it constantly, as if the mountain has seeped into your mouth. The cold dries everything, your lips crack, your tongue sticks briefly to your teeth. Even your eyes sting from the frozen wind. You blink rapidly, lashes clinking faintly with ice, each movement awkward. You glance around and see the same transformation on your comrades. Their faces shine pale, beards bristling with icicles that glitter faintly in the weak sun. Some men laugh at one another's appearance, pointing at grotesque frost masks forming around mouths and noses. One warrior sneezes, and the spray instantly stiffens into a tiny frozen crust on his scarf. The absurdity pulls a chuckle from you despite the misery. Yet beneath the humor lies danger. You notice a man rubbing his cheeks furiously, trying to restore color. His skin looks pale, waxy, almost blue. You know frostbite stalks silently, creeping in when laughter is loudest. The march continues anyway, because stopping would mean worse. Your hands sting with alternating pain and numbness. First the prickling burn of blood trying to flow, then the deadened silence of nerves shutting down. You beat your fists lightly against your thighs, desperate to feel something. The axe haft in your grip grows slick with frost, as though the weapon itself wishes to freeze free of you. Still, there is strange beauty in it. You look up and see the wind sweeping clouds across a sky so clear it feels infinite. The sun, faint and cold, glimmers on every icy beard and shield rim, turning the warband into a parade of glass statues. For a heartbeat, you imagine yourselves less as men and more as frozen heroes, etched against the mountain for eternity. The vision vanishes quickly with the next blast of wind, but you carry it with you. Perhaps this is what survival in the north truly means. Not just enduring pain, but learning to find fleeting glimpses of beauty inside the suffering and carrying them forward one step at a time. The rhythm of boots and breath grows monotonous, so someone begins to hum. At first it's a low murmur, almost drowned by the wind. Then another joins in, and another, until the hum becomes a tune, slow and steady, weaving through the cold air like smoke. Soon words are added, lines of sagas, half-remembered verses about gods, giants, and distant seas. Chronicles of the era describe Viking warriors relying on song and chant to keep pace during long journeys. The cadence of music stitched men together, turning weary steps into a single heartbeat. You feel it now. Your legs move in time with the rhythm. Your shoulders ache less when the voices rise. The mountain march becomes less a punishment and more a grim parade. And there's a curious practice mentioned in some sagas. Warriors were said to carve short staves of wood with runes, carrying them like musical talismans. These weren't instruments, but charms that held the memory of songs. A man might finger the carvings as he sang, believing the wood remembered his voice and would lend him strength the next time. You glance at one comrade tracing marks on a stick as he hums, eyes half closed, as if communing with the song itself. Yet the evidence leaves room for doubt about how widespread this habit truly was. Did every warband carry such rune staves? Or was it the custom of only a few skalds, poet-warriors who mixed memory with music? The sources diverge, leaving modern scholars unsure whether to treat it as fact or fancy. Still, in the quiet between verses, you almost believe the wood itself hums along. The soundscape changes with song. Instead of only the crunch of snow and the howl of wind, there is rhythm, harmony, something distinctly human. The deep baritones rumble like distant drums, while higher voices waver like flutes. The air tastes different when filled with sound, it seems warmer somehow, though your breath still bites with frost. You catch yourself singing softly, words fumbling at first but then flowing with the group. The verse is simple, a refrain about Odin's wisdom and Thor's hammer, but you don't need complexity. The purpose is not beauty, it is unity. Your voice cracks, raw from cold, yet it blends with the others into something larger. The humor surfaces too. One warrior throws in a bawdy verse, swapping the name of a goddess with a farm animal. The line sparks laughter, a rough chorus of chuckles that feels like a gift in this desolate place. Even the mountain seems less threatening when laughter hangs in the air. The physical toll doesn't vanish, but the songs wrap around it like bandages. The ache in your shoulders becomes background noise, softened by rhythm. The numbness in your fingers matters less when you're tapping them in time. Even the shield banging at your side sinks to the beat, turning from nuisance to percussion. Smells mix with sound. The wool and leather around you are heavy with sweat, smoke, and frost. But now the scent becomes tied to memory. This will be the smell of songs, of trudging through snow with voices rising above the wind. You breathe deeply, as if inhaling courage itself. When the tune finally ends, silence falls heavier than before. The wind returns, the snow squeaks, but the echo of voices lingers in your ears. It's as though the mountain itself carries the song, bouncing it back from ridge to ridge. You wonder if those echoes will remain long after you've passed, ghostly choruses haunting the valley. You march on, lips dry, chest sore, but your mind feels lighter. Music has done what meat and fire could not. It has made the cold feel briefly like background rather than the entire world. You know another song will rise soon, because silence is too harsh to endure alone. Night returns, and with it comes the problem of warmth. Fire is never enough on its own, not when the wind seeps through every crack in the camp. The only solution is each other. You and your comrades huddle close, pressing shoulders and backs together, arranging shields along the perimeter like extra walls. The result is a crude fortress of flesh and wood, where body heat and iron both play their part. One detail widely accepted among historians is that Vikings used their shields not only in battle but as multi-purpose tools, tables, sleds, and in winter, makeshift barriers against the cold. Lined up edge to edge, the shields form a circle, trapping precious heat inside. You feel the difference immediately. The air inside is still frigid, but without the direct bite of the wind, it's almost bearable. Stranger still, sagas preserve a peculiar image, warriors lying with their shields actually covering their bodies, like giant wooden blankets. The thought borders on ridiculous, sleeping under something you'd normally use to block an axe swing, but the weight presses close, sealing in what little warmth you still produce. You shuffle your own shield into position, half amused, half grateful. The scholarly debate lingers over just how effective such tactics were. Some argue the arrangement of men and shields was highly organized, drilled like battle formations. Others think it was far more chaotic, a desperate pile of bodies and boards with no order at all. The sources leave you guessing, but here, pressed between comrades, you know that order matters less than survival. The sensory experience is intense. The smell of men packed tightly together is unmistakable. Sweat heavy in wool, leather damp with frost, the faint sour tang of sour milk leaking from someone's pouch. It should be unpleasant, but instead it comforts you. That human scent means life, and life means warmth. You feel every shiver of the men beside you. Their cloaks brush against your arms, their breath fogs across your cheek. One man snores already, his head slumped onto another's shoulder. Another whispers a prayer to Thor, the words muffled by layers of fur. You close your eyes and let the chorus of breathing surround you, steady and grounding. The sound of the wind is muted by the shield wall. Outside, it howls and whips, but inside the circle it becomes a distant roar, like an animal pacing the edges of a cage. You listen carefully, relieved that tonight, at least, the beast cannot enter. You shift slightly, feeling the hard curve of the shield against your ribs. The wood smells faintly of pitch, the resin once used to seal its planks. That scent mixes with smoke from the dying fire and the musk of pelts, forming a tapestry of odors that cling to your skin. Your nose wrinkles, but you breathe deeply anyway. The cold still nips at your toes, creeping up from the snow beneath. You wiggle them inside your boots, hoping to keep the blood flowing. Your fingers are tucked under your arms, wrapped in fur, but they throb as if remembering every hour of exposure. You press closer to the man beside you, both of you sighing at the small increase in warmth. In this cramped embrace, the sense of individuality fades. You are not one warrior among many, you are part of a single, breathing organism, bound together for survival. If one man shifts, all shift. If one shivers, all feel it. And if one fails, the circle weakens. You realize that warmth here is more than temperature. It is trust. By lying so close, you entrust your life to the men around you, and they to you. Shields may guard your bodies, but it is loyalty that guards your spirit. The fire outside cracks one last time, and darkness swallows the camp. You drift towards sleep, wrapped in the heavy scent of men, wood, and frost, lulled by the strange comfort of being nothing more than one breath among many. The night has barely ended when you hear it, the low, distant sound that makes every man jolt upright. Wolves. Their howls roll across the snow like voices of the dead, long and mournful, rising and falling in eerie harmony. You clutch your shield instinctively, heart hammering. The cold may gnaw at flesh, but wolves bring a different kind of fear. The sense that the wilderness itself is alive and hunting you. Contemporary accounts confirm that wolves were a constant presence in Scandinavia's forests and mountains during the Viking Age. They followed travelers, sometimes for miles, waiting for exhaustion or weakness to create an opening. A warband on the move carried meat, blood, and fire, the very scents that drew hungry packs closer. You glance at the remnants of dried fish and bone in camp, suddenly wondering if they were a lure. Then you remember an eccentric note from folklore. It said that some warriors howled back, imitating wolves to frighten them off or, in darker tales, to invite their spirits as allies. You imagine the scene, dozens of frostbitten men standing in the snow, throwing their heads back, howling into the night as if competing with the beasts themselves. Absurd, perhaps, but also fitting. In a world where gods were shapeshifters and warriors wore wolf pelts into battle, the line between man and beast blurred easily. Yet the scholarly debate lingers over just how often wolves posed a real threat. Some researchers argue that packs avoided humans when possible, prowling the edges of camp but rarely attacking. Others believe that winter desperation drove them closer, emboldened by hunger, ready to test the courage of armed men. No firm answer exists, only the tension that laces the air whenever yellow eyes glimmer in the dark. The sensory world tonight is sharper than ever. The wind has died, leaving silence so complete that every snap of twigs, every crunch of snow seems magnified. The wolves' howls echo from ridge to ridge. Impossible to place, are they to the north, the east, or right behind you? The uncertainty gnaws more fiercely than hunger. You taste fear in your mouth, dry and bitter. Your tongue feels heavy, your lips cracked from cold. Every breath fogs the air, making you feel exposed, visible, like a signal flare to predators. You shift your shield slightly, the leather strap creaking, and the sound feels deafening in the hush. The smell of the camp is unmistakable. Smoke from dying embers, sweat trapped in wool, and the faint metallic tang of blood from a man's blistered hand. To wolves, it must be irresistible. You wrinkle your nose, half in disgust, half in worry, and pull your cloak tighter, as though that could disguise the scent. Your comrades stir restlessly. One man sharpens his spear point with exaggerated slowness, the scraping noise steady and ominous. Another ties extra thongs of leather around his boots, muttering that he won't let wolves pull him down easily. You catch eyes glinting in the firelight. Not wolves this time, but men's, wide and watchful, reflecting the same fear you feel. And then silence. The howls cut off as suddenly as they began. The absence is worse, because it suggests the wolves are no longer distant. You scan the darkness beyond the shield wall, squinting into the snowfields. Shadows move, or maybe your imagination makes them move. The edge of your vision fills with phantom forms, tails flicking, shapes darting. You grip your axe tighter, sweat prickling under layers despite the cold. When the first growl comes, low and guttural, every man stiffens. It sounds close, closer than you dared fear. A spear is lifted, a shield raised. You hold your breath, straining to hear paws on snow. Nothing. Just another growl, then another, circling. They are testing you. Your mind wanders to those old tales again, the ones about warriors wearing wolfskins in battle, the so-called berserkers who claim to fight with the spirit of the beast. You wonder if the animals see that in you now, kinship or challenge. The thought is unsettling, but it keeps you from breaking. Time stretches painfully. Minutes feel like hours, each heartbeat echoing in your ears. Finally, a loud crack, someone tosses a log onto the fire. Sparks leap high, casting sudden light into the dark. For a moment, you see them. Eyes, dozens of them, glimmering gold in the night. They vanish almost instantly, but the vision remains etched in your mind. The fire becomes your lifeline. You huddle closer to its warmth, though your back feels exposed. The crackling wood masks some of the wolves' sounds, which is both comfort and terror. You no longer know whether they've retreated or crept closer. Still, flames mean defiance. The mountain cold and the wolves both respect fire, or so you hope. Eventually the howls return, farther this time, fading into the night like a song winding down. Relief sweeps through the camp, not joyous, but exhausted. Men lower shields, though none set down their weapons. You realize your knuckles are white from gripping your axe, your arms trembling from holding tension too long. The night settles again. You stretch stiff fingers, flex your shoulders, and allow your breath to return to rhythm, yet the lesson lingers. In these mountains, danger isn't only snow or hunger, it has teeth, eyes, and a hunger of its own. As you close your eyes, the image of yellow eyes in the dark follows you into uneasy dreams. And when you wake, you know the wolves will still be there, padding silently along the edges of your march, waiting for weakness to return. Morning brings no mercy. The camp stirs slowly, men stiff and hollow-eyed, still haunted by the echo of wolves. You rise, brush frost from your cloak, and glance at the trail ahead. But there is no trail, only a wall of white fury rolling toward you. A blizzard has woken. Archaeological evidence points to the reality that Viking expeditions often faced sudden storms in mountain regions. Snow could fall thick enough to bury tents, erase paths, and trap whole warbands for days. You feel the truth of that now as the first gust hits, biting your face raw. Snow whirls around you, not drifting softly but hurled by invisible fists. A curious detail survives in some sagas. Warriors sometimes tied ropes around their waists, linking themselves together so none would vanish into the white. You see it now, cords tugging between men, a living chain dragged step by step. It looks almost comical at first, like children tied in a line, but the wisdom is undeniable. In a storm that blinds and deafens, a rope may be the only reminder that you are not alone. Some experts question if these practices were consistent or exaggerated in later storytelling. Did every band really lash themselves together, or was it a desperate improvisation used only in the harshest winters? The records blur, leaving doubt as thick as the snow itself. What is certain is that once the storm swallows you, even the strongest warrior can stumble and vanish without a trace. The sensory assault is immediate. Wind shrieks in your ears, louder than any battle horn. It carries ice shards that sting your cheeks like whip cracks. You squint, but snow forces your eyes shut, lashes crusting together, until vision becomes little more than shadows. Breathing is worse, the air clogs with flakes, each inhale raw, each exhale stolen away before it warms your lips. You taste the storm, cold and bitter. Flakes melt into droplets on your tongue, leaving behind nothing but a faint metallic tang. Your mouth feels dry even as snow seeps past your scarf, soaking fabric that stiffens instantly with frost. You cough, the sound ripped away by the wind before it leaves your chest. Every sense blurs except touch. The rope tugs at your waist, jerking you forward, reminding you to move. You clutch it with one hand, your axe in the other. Though fighting feels absurd here, the storm itself is the enemy, not a foe you can strike. The snow piles around your boots so fast that each step sinks deep. You yank your legs free, stumble, rise again. The effort drains you, muscles screaming as though you've marched for days in a single hour. Your comrades' voices are faint ghosts. A shout to the left is swallowed instantly. Another cry behind you vanishes into the roar. You can't see their faces, only vague forms swaying and stumbling, held together by rope and stubbornness. Fear gnaws at you. What if the rope snaps? What if you wander one step too far and find yourself lost in a sea of white, never to be seen again? The smell of the storm is raw and empty, no smoke, no sweat, just the sterile scent of snow dominating everything. You long for the musk of firewood or the tang of dried fish, anything human. Instead, you inhale nothingness, a reminder that the world here is stripped clean of comfort. You glance downward often, searching for tracks, but the storm erases them within seconds. The path behind you might as well never have existed. It is unsettling, as though time itself is being rewritten, your journey erased even as you take it. You understand now why sagas spoke of mountains that devoured men not with fangs, but with silence and snow. One man stumbles ahead of you, dropping to his knees. You lurch forward, grabbing his arm, pulling with the rope's help. His eyes are wide, his face grey, but he rises again, muttering thanks. The bond between men is the only anchor left in this shifting void. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time loses meaning in the storm. You fixate on rhythm, one step then another. You hum softly, the same tune from before, though the wind swallows it instantly. Still, it steadies you, a heartbeat against chaos. At last, the storm relents. The wind slows, the snow thins, and the world reappears piece by piece. Mountains loom again. Valleys stretch pale and empty, and the rope between you and the others sags loose. Relief is almost dizzying. You pull down your scarf, gulping air that tastes less like knives and more like life. The camp that night is subdued. Men collapse near the fire, too drained for laughter. Shields lean crooked in the snow, gear strewn carelessly. You sit close to the flames, holding your hands over them, feeling skin crackle with returning warmth. The smell of smoke is intoxicating, a reminder that you are still alive. You know storms will return, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps next week. They are as much a part of this journey as hunger or wolves. But you also know you endured one, and that knowledge is a weapon sharper than any axe. For in these mountains, survival is not measured by battles won, but by mornings lived through. Tonight, you sit by the fire, your cloak steaming, your body aching, and you whisper to yourself, another day stolen back from the snow. When the storm finally drifts into memory, you think perhaps the mountain has shown mercy, but the reprieve is brief. Soon a deeper, more insidious enemy sets in, not the sudden roar of avalanches or the shrieking of wolves, but the slow tightening grip of the cold inside your own body. The march no longer feels like walking. It feels like dragging bones that no longer wish to obey. Contemporary accounts confirm that prolonged exposure to freezing conditions left warriors stiff and sluggish, their joints nearly locking. Some writings from northern monks describe raiders who appeared like statues of ice, their movements jerky and painful. You sense the truth of this now. Every time you bend your knees, it feels as though rust has crept into your very marrow. Less conventional sources suggest that men rubbed snow into their limbs to restore circulation. It sounds counterintuitive using cold to fight cold, but the shock of ice against skin could jolt blood into motion. You picture a warrior slapping handfuls of snow against his thighs, cursing through chattering teeth, and you can almost feel the sting yourself. Strange methods, but in desperation, even pain becomes a tool. The evidence leaves room for doubt about how effective such remedies really were. Some scholars believe they may have done more harm than good, hastening frostbite rather than preventing it. Others argue that these rough methods, combined with sheer movement, kept enough warmth flowing to keep men on their feet. Whatever the truth, you know that without constant effort, the cold will claim you piece by piece. The sensations of stiffness are overwhelming. Your fingers barely close around your axe haft, the joints frozen stiff. You flex them again and again, but they respond sluggishly, like puppets tugged by weak strings. Your knees groan with each step, sharp pain shooting upward as though shards of ice have lodged inside. Your shoulders ache from carrying shield and pack, but worse is the dull numbness that creeps in when the pain subsides, a numbness that whispers of danger. Every breath now rattles through your chest. The cold air burns, and the sound of your own lungs is harsh and ragged. You cough, a wet crackle that echoes in your ears. The taste is metallic, a reminder that even inside your body the cold is carving away. Around you, others struggle too. One man stops to massage his calves furiously, slapping the muscles until they redden. Another shakes his hands violently, grimacing as blood trickles back into his fingertips. A third simply trudges, eyes glassy, as though each step is borrowed from stubbornness rather than strength. The soundscape of the march has changed. Gone are the songs of yesterday. Now the noise is one of groans, coughs, and the dull thud of boots dragging. Shields no longer clink proudly. They scrape against snow, worn down by fatigue. Even the wind sounds different, less like a roar and more like a mocking whisper, reminding you of how small you've become. The smell is heavy, oppressive. Wool soaked with sweat and frozen into stiff boards carries a sour stench. Leather reeks of damp rot. The faint tang of blood drifts from cracked lips and split knuckles. You inhale it all, a stew of misery that clings to every breath. Despite the suffering, strange adaptations emerge. A man beside you tucks his bare hands into the fur collar of the warrior in front of him, apologizing with a grunt. No one protests. Another slips dried moss into his boots to cushion against the ice, stuffing it between layers until his feet look swollen. Small acts of ingenuity keep the march alive, each one a reminder that survival is as much invention as it is endurance. And then there is silence, the kind that feels final. One warrior falls behind. You glance over your shoulder and see him kneeling, his shield half buried in snow. His face is pale, eyes shut, lips barely moving. You know the truth. He is not resting, he is surrendering. The line slows, but only briefly. A hand reaches out, shakes him, but he does not rise. The march moves on. You taste the bitterness of guilt. Every step forward feels like leaving a comrade behind. Yet the choice is stark. One death, or many. You swallow hard, your throat tight, the taste of salt and iron rising as though tears have frozen inside. The day stretches endlessly. Time becomes meaningless, measured only in aches and gasps. You think of home, of warmth, of summer meadows where joints bent freely and muscles carried you lightly. The memory feels foreign, a dream from another life. Here, every movement is a battle, and your enemy is not flesh and blood but ice itself. When camp is made that night, you collapse near the fire, limbs trembling. The warmth seeps in slowly, agonizingly. Fingers tingle painfully as blood returns, 1,000 needles stabbing at once. You groan, almost welcoming the pain, because it means life. Around you, others do the same, grimacing, swearing softly, even laughing through clenched teeth at the cruel mercy of returning sensation. The firelight flickers across stiff faces, turning warriors into statues of bronze and frost. You watch them rub hands, stamp feet, stretch aching joints, and you realize something profound. The battle with cold is not won in one night or one march. It is fought endlessly, every hour, every breath. And each small victory, every finger warmed, every toe saved, is worth more than gold. You settle closer to the flames, the smell of smoke wrapping around you like a blanket. The stiffness will return tomorrow, you know. The mountain is patient, and it will keep testing you. But for tonight at least, you move, you breathe, and you endure. The stiffness in your bones hasn't faded when the next challenge arrives. Tonight the men kneel in the snow, their hands clasped, their lips moving in quiet murmur. It's not food or fire they beg, for it's mercy from the gods. Out here, faith becomes another form of armor, as essential as fur or steel. One detail archaeologists and historians agree upon is that Viking warriors blended survival with ritual. Amulets of Thor's hammer have been found in camps and graves, tiny iron pendants worn as both protection and proclamation. You see them glint faintly in the firelight now, swinging from necks as men mutter prayers to Thor for strength, to Odin for wisdom, to Freya for safe passage. In this vast emptiness, their words feel like sparks against the dark. But folklore whispers about stranger habits. Some accounts suggest that before setting out, warriors carved runes into sticks or bones, carrying them like pocket-sized spells. In desperate hours, these charms were pressed to lips, kissed, or thrown into the snow as offerings. You picture a man digging out a sliver of carved wood, whispering to it as though it can hear. The scene borders on absurd, yet you don't laugh. Not here. Not when the cold claws at your ribs and makes you wonder if unseen powers are listening after all. Academics remain divided on whether these rituals were truly universal. Some argue that charms and offerings were everyday practice, while others believe they were the embellishments of poets eager to paint warriors as half-sorcerers. Evidence is scarce, leaving only fragments to interpret. You consider this debate as you watch the men, your breath fogging above folded hands. Maybe the truth matters less than the comfort faith provides. The sensory world around you sharpens in ritual. Fire crackles with unusual reverence, each spark leaping skyward like a prayer of its own. The smell of pine resin in the flames mixes with the musk of damp wool, creating a heady incense that clings to your nose. You hear murmured names: Odin, Thor, Freya, Njord spoken like old friends. The sound is steady, rhythmic, almost like the chants of last night's songs, but deeper, slower, tinged with need. Your own lips part, and words spill before you can think. You whisper a plea to Odin for endurance, to keep your legs moving when they wish to stop. You taste salt at the edge of your mouth, the faint bite of tears or sweat, you're not sure which. In the glow of the fire, every face looks carved, shadows accentuating hollows under eyes, brows furrowed in devotion. One man lifts his axe high, the blade gleaming in firelight, and mutters an oath that he will not let go until Thor himself pries it from his hand. Another sprinkles mead into the flames, precious drops sacrificed with a hiss, steam rising like ghostly fingers. You inhale the sweet tang of alcohol burning, a scent that carries memory of summer feasts, briefly banishing the taste of cold air. Not every ritual is solemn. There are quirks, too. A warrior ties a strip of red cloth around his wrist, claiming it wards off frostbite. Another scratches symbols in the snow, then spits on them, declaring it an insult to spirits that bring blizzards. The acts feel half comic, half serious, but no one mocks. In hardship, even absurd gestuures take on weight. And though scholars argue endlessly about the accuracy of such practices, here, in this circle of men and fire, the debate feels irrelevant. What matters is not whether the gods truly answer, but whether belief carries you forward when flesh and will falter. The sounds of prayer fade eventually, replaced by weary silence. The fire pops, a log collapsing inward, sparks spiraling like tiny stars. Men settle against shields, cloaks pulled tight, eyes closing. The ritual is done, but its echo lingers, a thread tying you all together through the night. You lean back, staring at the sky. Clouds part just enough to reveal stars, sharp and cold, yet steady. For a moment you believe they are listening, that somewhere far beyond the frost, Odin's one eye is watching, weighing, maybe even approving. The thought warms you more than the fire, a quiet ember glowing in your chest. The mountain wind sighs, brushing over the camp. You know it will test you again tomorrow. But tonight, faith stands between you and despair, and that is enough. You drift into uneasy sleep, with whispered prayers still lingering on your lips. Dawn comes, but it does not bring relief. The cold has shifted its attack. No longer satisfied with stiff joints and aching lungs, it begins to nibble at the edges of your flesh itself. You tug at your boots, and the sight beneath makes your stomach tighten, skin pale, swollen, the first cruel hints of frostbite. You wiggle your toes, desperate for sensation. There is some, but not enough. You wonder how many more mornings they will obey you. Archaeological evidence points to the toll winter campaigns took on bodies. Skeletal remains from Norse graves sometimes show signs of amputations, crude cuts where toes or fingers had been lost, likely to frostbite. Chroniclers in monasteries also recorded raiders arriving with blackened extremities, yet still swinging axes. You understand that grim truth now. Frostbite was not just common, it was expected. And there are unsettling anecdotes too. Folklore tells of warriors biting their own frozen fingers, trying to draw blood back into them. Imagine gnawing on your hand like bread, the copper taste of your own flesh mixing with ice. It sounds grotesque, yet in the desperation of the march, even such extremes might seem reasonable. Researchers remain divided over how frostbite was treated in these times. Some argue that men relied solely on natural thawing by fire, enduring agony as blood returned. Others suggest poultices of moss or animal fat were applied, sealing skin against further damage. The truth may never be settled, Bones and sagas rarely record the details of pain. The sensory experience is relentless. Your feet throb with alternating silence and fire, numb one moment, burning the next. The leather of your boots feels stiff, biting into ankles like iron bands. Each step sends a jolt of pain up your legs, sharper than any blade. Your fingers fare no better. Wrapped in stiff gloves, they ache constantly, refusing to grip without effort. You flex them until tears prick your eyes, but the stiffness always creeps back. The taste of the morning air is bitter, heavy with smoke from last night's fire. It clings to your mouth, mixing with the metallic tang of blood from cracked lips. You lick them out of habit, and the salt stings, freezing instantly into sharp crystals. Even your breath feels foreign, rattling in your chest like wind through dry reeds. Around you, the toll is visible. One man limps, his toes too swollen to fit comfortably in his boots. Another wraps rags tighter around his hands, groaning as he does. A third simply stares at his fingers, pale and waxy, as though unsure whether they still belong to him. The march doesn't stop. It never stops. You leave traces of blood in the snow, faint red blossoms quickly swallowed by white. The soundscape of suffering is haunting. Groans blend with the crunch of snow, forming a grim rhythm. Shields scrape dully, no longer proud or defiant but weary. Even the wind seems to mock you, whistling sharply as if laughing at your weakness. The wolves are gone, but you almost miss them. At least their threat was alive. This is just cold, invisible, endless. In the firelight that evening, the pain grows sharper. Fingers thaw slowly. Toes burn as sensation creeps back, each nerve screaming. Men curse and sob quietly, biting leather straps to muffle sound. You do the same, teeth sinking into fur, tasting sweat and salt. Relief hurts almost worse than numbness, but at least it promises life. And there are rituals for this too. A warrior presses his frost-bitten hand into the belly of a companion, stealing warmth from flesh to flesh. Another smears animal fat across his feet, the smell rancid but the insulation real. Someone laughs bitterly, muttering that fat, fish and fire are the only gods that matter in the mountains. You almost agree. The smell of burning fat fills the camp when one man drips it into the fire, holding his feet above the smoke. It is acrid, greasy, foul, but his sigh of relief tells you it works. If only a little. You wrinkle your nose yet lean closer, desperate for any method that promises reprieve. As you settle, staring at your swollen toes, you realize frostbite is not simply injury. It is erosion, a steady carving away of self. Each day the mountain takes a piece: skin, warmth, sensation. The question is how much you can lose before you are no longer whole. Sleep comes uneasily, toes throbbing under layers of wool, fingers tucked under arms. You whisper a promise to yourself that you will wake, that you will move, that you will not be the one left behind. The cold may bite, but you still have teeth of your own. Tomorrow, you will march again. The next morning, frostbitten toes and stiff fingers ache as you stand, but the march does not wait. You fall into line, shield, and axe once again heavy across your body. Yet despite cracked skin and throbbing joints, the warriors do something curious. They begin to practice. Out here, in waist-deep snow, with hunger chewing at their bellies and cold gnawing at their bones, men form a ragged circle and lift their weapons. One detail well documented in chronicles is that Viking bands often drilled during expeditions. Even in hostile lands, they rehearsed shield walls and spear thrusts, knowing discipline kept them alive as much as strength. You watch now as men bang shields together, the sound muffled by snow but still fierce. Spears jab outward in rhythm, forming a spiked wall even though no enemy is in sight. The routine is exhausting, yet strangely invigorating, like stretching stiff muscles after too long in the cold. Stranger still are the accounts of mock duels carried out in winter camps. Folklore tells of warriors pairing off to spar with blunted blades or even wooden sticks, more to entertain themselves than to hone skill. Imagine trudging through a blizzard all day, then laughing as you smack a friend with a frozen branch. It feels absurd, but you can see why. Laughter and movement keep despair from settling in deeper than the snow. Some researchers question whether these winter drills were practical or merely romanticized exaggerations. Did warriors really risk precious energy in play fights, or is it the invention of poets painting their ancestors as tireless? The evidence is inconclusive, leaving scholars divided. Still, as you watch men stomp, shout, and jab, you know the practice is not about waste, it is about defiance. The sensory landscape of the drill is vivid. Shields crash together with dull thuds, sending vibrations up your arm each time you raise yours. The air tastes of iron from sweat freezing on lips, a strange blend of salt and metal. Every exhale fogs the air, swirling around warriors' heads like steam from war horses. The smell of wet leather and damp wool is everywhere, heavy and sour, mixing with faint smoke from the morning fire. You take your place in the circle, axe raised. Your shoulders scream with pain, but the rhythm carries you forward. Step, thrust, step, swing. The crunch of boots in snow sinks with the chants of men shouting short commands. Wall, push, hold. Their voices bounce between the mountains, strong despite exhaustion. You feel a surge of unity, the same warmth that singing gave you days before. Your hands ache gripping the axe, fingers numb around the haft. Yet as you swing, heat sparks briefly in your muscles, reminding you they are not dead yet. The blade cuts through the air with a whistle, slicing flakes of snow from the wind. You pant heavily, the scarf around your mouth damp with breath, then frozen stiff again in moments. Still, you push. Around you, laughter surfaces. One man slips in the snow, falling flat on his back with a shield clattering down on top of him. The circle erupts in chuckles, even as another hand reaches to pull him up. Another warrior deliberately swings too wide, exaggerating like a drunken performer, and his comrades hoot. The absurdity lightens the weight of the march more than any food could. The drills end with men collapsing onto their shields, panting clouds into the air. The fire crackles nearby, smoke drifting sharp and woody. You sink down too, muscles trembling, chest heaving. Your body is drained, but your spirit is oddly steadier. Practicing battle in the snow is not about preparing for some distant enemy. It is about reminding yourselves that you are still warriors, not just frozen husks stumbling forward. Later, when camp quiets, you replay the day's drills in your mind. The sound of shields clashing echoes in your ears like thunder. You can still feel the sting in your palms from gripping too hard, the burn in your thighs from stomping against the snow. And strangely, you cherish it. Because in those moments, you were not merely enduring, you were fighting, even if the enemy was invisible. You glance at your comrades as they gnaw on dried fish and barley cakes, their laughter fading into tired silence. Some are already asleep, shields propped as pillows. Others poke at the fire with spear shafts, sparks spiraling upward like fleeting stars. You breathe deeply, smoke and sweat heavy in the air, and let the exhaustion wash over you. The mountain has taken much flesh, warmth, comfort, but today you reclaimed something: identity. The drills proved that you are still more than shivering bodies. You are warriors, bound by rhythm, laughter, and stubbornness. And tomorrow, when the snow rises again, you will march not just as survivors, but as men who remember who they are. The march grows longer, the nights colder, and yet the band trudges onward. But not all who travel here are warriors. Tonight, as the fire crackles low and bellies ache with hunger, you notice the women and thralls who walk among you. Their presence is quieter, less recorded in sagas, yet utterly essential. Survival does not rest on warriors alone, it rests on every hand willing to work. One detail confirmed by contemporary chronicles is that Viking expeditions were often accompanied by camp followers. Women, servants, and enslaved people provided cooking, mending, and carrying duties that freed warriors to conserve their strength. You see it clearly now as a thrall bends over the fire, stirring a pot of thin stew, while another kneels to patch a torn boot with scraps of hide. Without them, the warband would collapse under the weight of its own needs. There's a curious glimpse from saga fragments. Women sometimes carried small iron cauldrons slung from pack animals, considered valuable enough to be worth ransoming if lost. You watch one woman lift such a pot now, blackened from fire, and you can almost imagine her haggling over it with an enemy. It borders on absurdity that a cooking vessel could be treated like treasure, but in this frozen world, warm stew is worth more than gold. Some experts still argue about the exact role of these followers. Were women truly equal partners on campaign? Or were they tolerated as necessities only in long marches? Did thralls serve willingly, or under constant threat? The written sources are sparse, leaving much to interpretation. What you know for certain is that tonight, no one complains when the pot is passed and steam drifts through the air. The sensory world of camp life shifts with their presence. Instead of only the stench of sweat and leather, you smell broth simmering, thin though it island. Barley and fish mix with wild herbs gathered from the valley below, their sharp tang masking the rank odor of damp wool. The crackle of firewood blends with the bubbling of stew, a sound as soothing as any song. You take a cupful, carved from horn, and sip carefully. The warmth spreads instantly, burning your tongue but soothing your chest. The taste is plain, earthy, salty barley softened to mush, dried fish rehydrated until it flakes apart. Yet it feels like a feast after days of chewing bark-tough rations. You sigh, letting steam curl across your face, grateful for the work of hands that will never be sung about in sagas. Around you, the women move steadily. One rewraps a warrior's hands with fresh wool strips, muttering about frostbite. Another sharpens a sewing needle over the fire, ready to repair a split seam in a cloak. Their chatter is low but constant, a counterpoint to the silence of men too tired for speech. You hear laughter now and then, soft and quick, as if the cold cannot extinguish every spark of humour. The thralls labour without pause. One hauls firewood, shoulders stooped under the weight of logs. Another cleans fish, the smell sharp and pungent, scales flashing briefly in the firelight before being tossed aside. Their movements are efficient, almost mechanical, yet there is something haunting in their silence. You wonder if their thoughts drift to homes long lost, to chains they cannot escape even in snow. The sounds of the night mingle into a rhythm, stew bubbling, sewing needles clicking, wood snapping in the fire. It is a music of survival, uncelebrated yet essential. You breathe deeply, inhaling broth and smoke, and realize how much you depend on these quieter figures. Warriors may swing axes, but it is the unseen labor that keeps flesh from giving out. One warrior mutters a jest, raising his horn in salute to the cook. Laughter ripples around the circle, though it fades quickly into exhaustion. You sip the last of your broth, licking the salty residue from your lips, and feel life trickle back into your limbs. Later, when the fire burns low, you notice one woman carefully mending a boot by firelight. Her fingers are red and cracked, the leather stiff and stubborn. Yet she works with steady rhythm, thread pulling through hide with a sound like whispering snow. The warrior who owns the boot snores nearby, oblivious. You watch her finish the stitch, tie it off, and smile faintly to herself. That quiet moment, unrecorded and unpraised, carries as much weight as any shield wall. The debate about their roles may continue among scholars, but here the truth is plain. Without these companions, the march would falter. Their labor is the invisible backbone of survival, and as you pull your cloak tight, the taste of warm stew still lingering, you feel gratitude swell in your chest. The mountains take much, but tonight they have given you this, a reminder that survival is never the work of one kind of strength alone. Axes, hands, fire, and thread, all are equal when winter tries to claim you. The fire burns low, and morning arrives with the grumble of empty bellies. Your throat feels dry again, but hunger overshadows thirst. The thin stew of the night before is already a memory, and the thought of another march without food gnaws at you worse than frostbite. Provisions dwindle, and now the warband must rely not only on what they carry, but on what they can find or bargain for along the way. Chronicles of the time describe Viking warriors stopping in remote villages or way stations, trading goods even during campaigns. Iron, tools, beads, and salt were often exchanged for bread, cheese, or dried meat. It's easy to imagine why. Marching endlessly in snow drains strength faster than any battle, and replenishing food was as urgent as sharpening steel. You see it now, as a group approaches a mountain hamlet, smoke curling faintly from the chimney of a longhouse half buried in snow. And there are stranger glimpses too. One saga mentions warriors offering combs carved from bone or fragments of walrus ivory as barter. A curious choice, ornamental objects for survival food. But perhaps a comb was worth more than coin when local farmers needed tools as much as warriors needed calories. The thought makes you smirk. Imagine trading a hair comb for a wheel of cheese, both sides certain they got the better bargain. Interpretations vary widely on how often these encounters were peaceful. Some scholars argue that most trading was straightforward, born of necessity and mutual respect in harsh environments. Others believe the line between trading and raiding blurred constantly, with warriors sometimes negotiating, sometimes taking by force. Out here, the difference might depend only on how desperate the band had become. The sensory details of barter are vivid. The village smells of wood smoke and goats, a welcome change from the musk of sweat and leather. The longhouse creaks as the door opens, letting out a burst of warmth and a whiff of fresh bread that makes your stomach clench painfully. Inside, you hear the murmur of voices, wary farmers bargaining with men whose axes gleam at their belts. You taste the sharp salt of dried fish pressed into your palm during exchange. The flesh is chewy, briny, but glorious after days of bland barley. Your tongue revels in it, even as you know the flavor is fleeting. Another man chews a hunk of goat cheese, the tang filling the air with a sour musk that makes others' mouths water. A pot of thin beer is passed around, its yeasty froth bubbling faintly. You take a sip, the bitter taste cutting through the metallic dryness in your mouth. The soundscape buzzes with negotiation. Coins clink softly, though more often goods exchange without them. Leather straps, iron knives, bone combs, and salt lumps are laid out like treasure. Voices rise and fall, sometimes calm, sometimes sharp, when warriors push too hard for more. A goat bleats in protest as one farmer tugs it forward, and laughter ripples through the band at the animal's stubbornness. There is tension too. A farmer's eyes linger too long on a warrior's sword. Hands hover near axe handles, not lifting but ready. You feel the air shift, thick with the possibility of violence. But the moment passes, and the trade concludes. Warriors leave with bundles of bread and smoked meat, villagers with beads and iron tools. No blood stains the snow today. Back on the march, the food is shared sparingly. A crust of bread is torn into pieces, passed from hand to hand. The smell of smoke-cured meat fills the air as strips are chewed slowly, savored like rare delicacies. You take your portion, pressing it to your lips, and sigh at the burst of flavor. Even stale bread feels soft compared to frozen rations, and each bite revives you. Not everything is pleasant. Some men barter poorly, returning with fermented milk, so sour it curdles the stomach. Others chew it anyway, grimacing, but waste is not tolerated. A few chuckle darkly, joking that the milk tastes like it was squeezed from a goat long dead. The laughter eases the bitterness, though the smell lingers long after. As you march, you realize how fragile the Balance Island provisions will not last forever, and the next village may not be so willing, or may not exist at all. Survival depends not just on endurance, but on constant exchange. Food for iron, beads for bread, trinkets for life itself. When camp is made that night, bellies slightly fuller, the mood is lighter. Men talk more freely, voices rising in stories. A skald recites a tale of Odin trading an eye for wisdom, and the irony is not lost. Trade, it seems, is as old as myth, and just as costly. You sip the last of your beer, its bitter taste warming your chest, and let the firelight ease your mind. Tomorrow may bring hunger again, but for now, the band has bargained one more day from the mountains, and in this march of endless cold, a single day is victory enough. By now, the warband has learned that every ache, every wound, every cracked lip requires attention if the march is to continue. Tonight, the fire circle is not filled with drills or songs, but with the slow, deliberate tending of bodies. Men strip off boots, peel away stiff gloves, and examine the damage. The air smells not only of smoke and broth, but of sweat-soaked wool, animal fat, and herbs ground between stones. Archaeological finds suggest strongly that Vikings carried a surprising knowledge of simple medicine. Fragments of birch bark with traces of antiseptic compounds, bones showing signs of healed surgery, and even remnants of herbal poultices tell us that these were not ignorant wanderers. You see it now. One man chews willow bark, grimacing at its bitter taste, knowing it dulls pain much like medicine centuries later. And there's an eccentric note preserved in lore. Some warriors rubbed sheep tallow mixed with moss over cracked skin, believing the moss drew out frost while the fat sealed in warmth. The mixture stinks of rot and pasture, yet you watch as it's smeared onto blistered feet, the patient groaning in both pain and relief. Odd as it seems, no one mocks. Out here, even absurd remedies are lifelines. Academics continue to disagree on how formal this medical knowledge truly was. Did warbands include designated healers trained in herb lore, or was treatment improvised, passed from elder to youth by word of mouth? The evidence is patchy, leaving room for speculation. But whether through tradition or desperation, the care continues, and men survive another night. The sensory details are intense. You sit by the fire as a pouch of dried herbs is opened, the sharp scent of yarrow and thyme flooding the air. It cuts through the sour stench of damp wool, almost refreshing. The hiss of fat melting in a pot joins the crackle of burning wood, an oddly domestic sound in this brutal landscape. You breathe deeply, inhaling both stink and comfort, because both mean life. Your own hands ache as you unwrap the wool strips binding them. Skin beneath is cracked, pale and raw. A comrade hands you a paste made from ground pine resin mixed with honey. The texture is sticky, unpleasant, but when you spread it over your wounds, the sting dulls slightly. You lick your lips and taste sweetness lingering on your fingers, mingled with resin's sharp tang. Strange medicine, but it works. Around you, the camp becomes a kind of clinic. One man holds his foot near the fire, wincing as blood returns to blackened toes. Another has his arm bound with strips of linen scavenged from a torn tunic, the cloth stiff with dried blood. The soundscape is filled with groans, muttered prayers, and the steady rhythm of grinding stones crushing herbs into powder. You watch as one thrall presses warm stones against a warrior's chest to ease coughing. The smell of damp earth rises from the heated rocks, mingling with the ever-present smoke. A woman hums softly while she sews a wound with sinew thread, each puncture audible, a soft tearing sound followed by the pull of string. The warrior clenches his teeth, sweat freezing instantly on his brow. You shiver just watching. Despite the grimness, humor surfaces. A man smears fat across his cracked lips, grinning as he declares himself ready to kiss Freya herself. Laughter ripples, short and rough, but it lightens the heavy air. Another jokes that the moss poultice makes him smell better than before, which earns a round of snorts from those close enough to disagree. The night wears on, and the fire burns steady, flames licking higher each time resin is tossed in for light. The smoke clings to your nostrils, thick and sweet, carrying the scent of pine forests far below these mountains. You close your eyes and imagine them, warm sun slanting through tall trees, the ground soft with needles. The vision fades when someone coughs harshly nearby, but it leaves a brief warmth in your chest. You settle back, bandaged hands stiff but less painful. Your toes still ache, but they are wrapped now, and you trust the warmth of fire and wool. Around you, the men look more human again, patched, tended, bruised but whole. For a moment, the warband resembles not warriors but weary family clustered around the hearth. The scholars may argue forever about whether Vikings marched with healers or simply improvised. But as you lie down with resigned-scented hands and honey still on your tongue, you know the truth of this night. Survival is not only the clash of steel, but the art of care. Without poultices, without fat, without moss and honey, there would be no one left to wield axes tomorrow. You close your eyes, smoke curling around you like a second cloak, and drift into uneasy dreams, the smell of herbs lingering as a reminder that even in the harshest cold, the body can be coaxed back from the brink if only for another day. By the time the band leaves camp again, the air feels heavier than before. Not colder, exactly, but heavier, as if the mountains are pressing down, testing your spirit as much as your flesh. The men move in silence, their breath hissing through frost-stiff scarves. But when the line halts on a ridge, you notice something unusual. Several warriors kneel, pulling small bundles from their packs. Charms, amulets, sticks carved with runes. The rituals for survival begin. One detail often noted by archaeologists is the frequency of rune-carved objects in Viking graves and campsites. Short inscriptions scratched into wood, bone, or antler sometimes bore words of protection or invocation. You see it now as a man traces the edge of a rune stick with his thumb, lips moving in a whisper. His voice is almost lost in the wind, yet his eyes burn with focus. And there's an odd story tucked away in sagas. Warriors sometimes tied tiny bones, even fragments of animal teeth, to their belts as protective tokens. You glance at a comrade who wears a fox jawbone dangling from his cord. It swings with every step, absurdly small compared to the weight of his axe, but he touches it often, as though its power lies not in size but in belief. Researchers remain divided on how literally these rituals were practiced. Some insist the charms had deep religious purpose, while others argue they were more symbolic reminders of home or identity rather than true magic. The debate lingers, unsolved, like the question of whether gods truly walk these mountains. Yet for you, watching tired men mutter to scraps of wood and bone, it is obvious that belief itself is fuel. The sensory details sharpen in ritual. The fire crackles faintly, smoke curling upward in thin streams. Resin tossed into the flames releases a sharp, pine-sweet aroma, mixing with the musk of wool and leather. The runes carved on sticks glow briefly as sparks leap, their edges catching light before fading back to shadow. You breathe in deeply, the resin stinging your nose, leaving a taste like bitter sap on your tongue. Sounds are quieter tonight. No songs, no bawdy jokes, just murmured chants. One warrior rhythmically strikes his shield with 2 fingers, creating a low, steady beat. Another hums, voice shaking but steady enough to weave a pattern through the night. The combined rhythm is hypnotic, making you sway slightly, even seated. You close your eyes and sense the warmth of the fire on your skin, the cold wind trying to steal it away. Your fingers clutch your own charm, a small pendant of Thor's hammer you hadn't touched in days. It's cold against your palm, heavy with more meaning now than ever before. You mutter a few words, uncertain if they count as prayer or habit. The taste of smoke fills your mouth with each syllable. Some rituals verge on strange. A man sprinkles mead into the snow, a libation for spirits of the mountain. Another scrapes a rune into the ice itself, then spits onto it, sealing his oath with breath. A third ties a scrap of red cloth to his spearhead, claiming it keeps frost spirits away. The sight is almost comic, yet no one laughs. Belief, no matter how odd, is sacred when death breathes so close. You feel the effect even without certainty. The ritual creates cohesion, the invisible bond of men who believe in something greater than themselves. Whether gods, spirits, or simple habit, the act binds you together like rope in a blizzard. You draw comfort from the low chanting, the glowing charms, the smell of pine and smoke. Later, as the fire dies lower, You lie back and stare at the stars. The sky is painfully clear, each star sharp as an etched rune. You imagine them as inscriptions written by the gods themselves, guiding your steps across the frozen canvas of the world. The thought is soothing, even if only fancy. The camp quiets, men drifting into uneasy sleep, charms clutched tightly in their fists or tied to their belts. You close your eyes too, the pendant pressing against your palm. The warmth of the fire fades, but belief lingers an ember in your chest that resists the cold. You know the rituals may not change the mountain, but they change you, and perhaps that is enough. Tomorrow, the snow will still rise, the wind will still howl, the march will still grind bones and spirits. But tonight, you have whispered to the gods, carved your signs, and laid your offerings. You fall asleep with the faint hope that somewhere, someone or something has heard. The march takes you deeper into the mountains, where the white ridges fold like waves on a frozen sea. You expect only snow and rock, the endless repetition of hardship, when suddenly figures appear on the horizon. Cloaked in heavy hides, moving with a gait unlike yours, they seem almost part of the landscape until the reindeer antlers strapped to their sleds catch the light. These are strangers, yet not enemies. Archaeological and written sources alike confirm that Norsemen sometimes encountered the Samy people in northern Scandinavia. Known for their skill in surviving the cold, they were traders, guides, and herders whose knowledge of reindeer and mountain terrain was unparalleled. Tonight you see them clearly. Short sledges drawn across snow, people wrapped in reindeer pelts so thick they seem armored in fur. And there's an unusual custom whispered in chronicles. The Sami were said to carry carved drums, decorated with symbols, used to divine paths or weather before setting out. You imagine the sound of that drum echoing across the white emptiness, guiding warriors with rhythms said to come from spirits. Whether truth or exaggeration, it fits the aura of these mountain dwellers, who seem more in tune with the wilderness than any warband. Specialists continue to disagree on how these encounters played out. Some argue that Vikings exploited the Sami, demanding tribute or trade under threat. Others believe relationships were more cooperative, with Norsemen relying on Sami expertise to cross unforgiving landscapes. Evidence leans both ways, leaving you to imagine both possibilities as you approach. Will these strangers offer guidance, or withhold it until they know what kind of men you are? The sensory world of this meeting is unlike anything you've felt before. The smell of reindeer hides drifts on the wind, rich and musky, layered with the faint aroma of smoke from their hearths. It mingles with the sour tang of sweat from your own cloaks, and the combination is sharp but oddly grounding. Sounds carry differently too. Instead of the steady crunch of boots, you hear the soft slide of sled runners gliding over snow. The bells tied to reindeer harnesses jingle faintly, delicate and strange against the vast silence. The rhythm of those bells lingers in your ears, oddly soothing, like a lullaby in the storm. You taste salt on your lips, remnants of dried fish, as you watch them approach. Hunger sharpens your attention. You know these people may have food your warband desperately needs. The thought makes you swallow hard, your throat dry despite the snow all around. When the Sami finally stop, their eyes watch you closely, unreadable beneath heavy fur hoods. A reindeer snorts, steam curling from its nostrils. One of your leaders steps forward, raising empty hands in a gesture of parley. Voices mingle your tongue and theirs, not fully understood but woven with gestures, trade items lifted for inspection. What they offer is astonishing. Dried reindeer meat, hard but rich, and fat lumps used as fuel and food. You smell the fat even before it is handed over, sharp and oily, and your stomach clenches. In exchange, your men hold out knives, beads, iron tools. The stranger's eyes linger longest on the iron, their hands tracing its shape as if measuring its weight against survival itself. A Sami woman pours liquid from a skin flask. The scent is pungent, unfamiliar fermented reindeer milk, perhaps. You sip when it's offered, and the taste nearly makes you cough. Sour, heavy, with a tang that burns your throat. Yet warmth follows quickly, spreading through your belly, and you wonder if the taste is worth the strength it lends. The soundscape shifts again as negotiations relax. Voices grow louder, men laugh at the reindeer snorting and stamping. One of your comrades reaches out to touch a sled, running his hand along smooth wood polished by years of use. The Samy guide chuckles, slapping the sled with affection, proud of its craftsmanship. For a moment, the harshness of the mountain softens into an exchange of pride and skill. Not every moment is peaceful. A warrior grumbles at the small portion of meat handed to him, and hands twitch near axe handles. But the tension passes as quickly as it rises. The strangers are calm, deliberate, as though used to walking the line between cooperation and conflict. When night falls, the two groups camp near one another. Fires flicker, and smoke curls upward in twin plumes. You listen to the Samy voices drifting on the wind, their language strange yet musical, full of long vowels and soft consonants. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm soothe you even though you don't understand the meaning. Later, you see one of them sit with a drum stretched with hide, tapping softly with a carved stick. The sound is low, steady, almost hypnotic. Warriors watch in silence, unsure whether to laugh or bow. You feel your eyelids grow heavy with the rhythm, as though the drum is not merely sound but spell. Scholars may never agree on whether these meetings were friendly or hostile, rare or common, but in this moment you know the truth. Survival in the mountains is not possible alone. You accept the meat, the milk, the guidance of strangers, and for tonight, the path ahead feels less like death and more like possibility. By now the days of silence and grinding snow have blurred together, and every step feels the same. But tonight, as the fire glows low and the mountain wind presses against your ears, something different happens. The skald, the storyteller, clears his throat. His voice rises, cracked but strong, and suddenly the march is no longer just misery, it is story. What records make clear is that Viking war bands almost always included a skald or someone willing to act as one. These poet historians kept memory alive, reciting sagas, tales of gods, and boasts of past victories. Around the fire, their words stitched morale back together, reminding men of reasons beyond survival. You feel it now, the way voices lean toward the storyteller, eyes glittering in firelight despite exhaustion. But sagas also contain stranger notes. A few describe skalds weaving humor into their verse-bawdy tales of gods chasing maidens, or mocking verses about clumsy warriors. The oddity of it makes sense out here. Laughter loosens frostbitten joints better than medicine. You chuckle yourself when the skald recites a ridiculous line about Thor mistaking a goat for a bride, his voice rising in mock-serious tones that draw groans and smirks alike. Some experts question how much of this humor was truly present in the grim reality of campaigns. Were sagas lightened by jokes during the journey, or did poets later embellish them, turning suffering into entertainment for listeners back home? The truth lies hidden between firelight and ink, and scholars will likely never agree. But tonight, hearing the skald's verse, you know that laughter is as essential as meat or mead. The sensory experience is overwhelming. The fire cracks, sparks leaping like stars, smoke drifting sharp and sweet. The words of the skald weave through the hiss of burning resin, rhythmic and deep. Your ears strain to catch every phrase, though the language is half lost in dialects and mutters. You smell sweat on the man beside you, wool damp with snow, but somehow the odor becomes part of the memory. Sagas are always meant to be lived in groups, never alone. You taste broth on your tongue, remnants of the evening meal, its salt and smoke lingering. The warmth in your belly makes you drowsy, yet the skald's voice keeps you awake. His verse is not polished, it cracks, falters, then soars, but the imperfections make it human. Each line feels like a reminder that suffering itself is part of the story. He tells of Odin's wanderings, how the god disguised himself to test men's courage. The words feel eerily fitting, as if your own march is just such a test. each frostbitten toe a measure of loyalty. Men nod, mutter prayers, or simply stare into the flames. You feel your chest tighten, caught between awe and fear. Then the skald shifts tone, reciting a tale of a warrior so hungry he mistook a frozen log for bread, gnawed it until his teeth cracked. The camp erupts in laughter, the sound ragged, but real. Your shoulders shake despite the pain in your joints. Even absurdity becomes relief. The smell of pine smoke grows heavier, clinging to your hair and cloak, but you don't mind. It carries the story, binding memory to scent. Long after the words fade, the smell will remind you of this night, of voices rising in defiance of the mountain's silence. The skald ends with a boast of his own, claiming that tomorrow he'll march farther than any warrior, his tongue sharper than their swords. Groans and playful insults follow, but the banter lightens the gloom. You see men smile genuinely for the first time in days. Their eyes gleam with more than fatigue, they gleam with shared spirit. As you settle to sleep, the echoes of verse still ring in your ears. The rhythm of words blends with the rhythm of wind, creating a lullaby, strange but soothing. You close your eyes, the taste of laughter lingering, and realize something profound. In these mountains, stories are as vital as bread. They keep despair from swallowing you whole. The scholars may argue about accuracy, but you know what is true tonight. Without a skald, the march would be only misery. With him, it becomes a saga, one you live step by step, breath by breath, word by word. The days pass, and the snow no longer feels like an enemy so much as a test that repeats itself endlessly. Yet as the march drags on, something subtler emerges. You begin to notice the way men glance at one another, how voices sharpen in the cold, how silence can cut deeper than any blade. The mountain doesn't only wear down flesh, it wears down trust. Evidence from sagas and chronicles makes it clear that long campaigns tested loyalty as fiercely as battle. Bands that fought together often cracked apart when starvation and frost weakened bonds. Some accounts speak of warriors abandoning comrades, stealing rations, or turning on leaders in desperate moments. You feel the weight of that possibility every time eyes linger too long on another man's food sack. And then there are the stranger rumors. Stories of men deliberately hiding extra layers of fur or scraps of meat, pretending to suffer while hoarding strength. A curious detail even claims that some spat into the snow to feign thirst, tricking others into offering water. You glance around the campfire and wonder, could it be true? Would someone really gamble his comrades' lives for one more day of warmth? Out here, the line between loyalty and survival is thin indeed. Scholars remain divided on whether these betrayals were common or isolated, mythologized to heighten the drama of sagas. Some argue that solidarity defined Viking war bands, others that self-preservation often broke bonds. The debate echoes the very tension you feel tonight. Do you trust the man beside you, or do you watch him more closely? The sensory world reveals the tension. You smell smoke from the fire, but beneath it, the faint musk of hidden fat, the oily tang that makes you wonder if someone has kept more than his share. You hear hushed voices at the edge of camp, too quiet to catch but sharp enough to raise suspicion. The crunch of snow under secret footsteps lingers longer than it should. Even touch betrays unease. When you pass food along the line, hands grasp too quickly, too tightly. Fingers linger on the horn cup before releasing it. You feel the weight of distrust in every exchange, as though each bite might be the last one freely given. Laughter still surfaces, but it carries an edge. One man jokes about another's hollow belly, and the response is a glare sharp enough to silence the fire circle. Another boasts he could march 2 days without food, and the mutters that follow are less admiration than suspicion. Humor once eased hunger, now it stirs doubt. The soundscape of camp changes too. Instead of unified chants or songs, voices grow fragmented. One man hums alone, ignored by others. Another sharpens his axe longer than necessary, the rasping scrape loud and ominous. The rhythm of breathing is uneven, No longer the harmony of a shield wall, but the disjointed chorus of individuals clinging to themselves. And yet, moments of solidarity persist. A warrior notices his comrade's boot unfastened and kneels to tie it for him, muttering curses at the clumsy laces. Another silently passes a scrap of bread to the youngest member of the band, pretending he's not hungry. These small gestures burn as brightly as the fire, proof that not all bonds are breaking. You sense that trust is tested most at night. In darkness, when men curl against shields and cloaks, the silence grows heavy. You hear stomachs rumbling louder than wolves, breaths held too long, sighs sharp as accusations. Sleep comes slowly, because you know that hunger can turn even brothers into rivals. You shift your shield closer to your side, fingers tracing its rim. Not out of fear of wolves tonight, but of men. You hate the thought, but you can't deny it. Survival has sharpened everyone into something harder, something less forgiving. The gods may demand courage, but the mountain demands suspicion. Yet in the midst of that unease, you remind yourself of the truth you've seen. Loyalty can survive the cold, but only if guarded as fiercely as fire. You stoke both the flames before you and the trust between comrades with equal care. The scholars may never decide whether betrayal or solidarity defined Viking marches. But here, on this ridge, you feel both forces pressing against one another like ice and fire. Tomorrow, you will rise again, shield heavy, stomach empty, and eyes watchful. And with each step, you will test not only your strength but the loyalty of every man around you. For in these mountains, trust itself is as fragile as ice and just as vital to survival. The march presses on, and hunger claws deeper. Frost and wind can be endured with furs and fire, but when food dwindles to nothing, desperation gnaws at the soul. Tonight you sit near the fire, staring at your hands, the cracks in your skin, and you wonder how much longer the body can endure without fuel. Archaeological evidence from Norse settlements suggests that dried meat and fish, even when rationed carefully, could not last through long marches. Bones of small game found in camps hint at another truth. Warriors trapped and ate whatever the wilderness offered: hares, grouse, foxes, even the occasional raven. You feel the weight of that fact as you watch men set crude snares near the camp's edge, hoping the snow itself will surrender prey. And there are unsettling stories that hover at the edge of history. Some chronicles whisper that starving bands boiled leather from their own boots, chewing it into tough strips to fill their stomachs. You imagine the bitter taste of tanned hide, smoky and sour, sticking in your teeth. The thought makes you gag, but you know you would chew it gladly if hunger tightened further. Academics remain divided on whether Viking warriors ever resorted to such extremes, or if these tales were exaggerations written by enemies to emphasize their desperation. The truth lies buried with the men who starved, their bellies empty, their bones gnawed by wolves. Still, as you watch comrades gnaw at dried marrow bones for the last flecks of fat, you suspect those grim tales contain more truth than fable. The sensory world of hunger is sharp. You taste acid constantly, your stomach clawing upward as though devouring itself. The smell of even thin stew becomes intoxicating, filling your head until you feel dizzy. When someone roasts a strip of hare meat over the fire, the scent of fat sizzling drives men half mad, their eyes wide, hands twitching toward the spit. Sound becomes unbearable too. The crackle of fire, once soothing, now torments you by reminding you of food cooking. The snap of bones splitting as marrow is sucked out makes your own teeth ache. Even the low groan of a comrade's empty stomach feels louder than wolves. You chew snow to quiet thirst, but it does nothing for hunger. Your tongue feels thick, your teeth ache from the cold, and your belly growls like an angry beast. A scrap of bread is passed around hard, stale, crumbling to dust. You lick your fingers after touching it, unwilling to waste even crumbs. Desperation spawns odd behaviors. One man digs under tree bark, pulling out grubs, eating them raw with a grimace. Another tosses pine needles into boiling water, claiming it makes broth. The liquid tastes bitter, resinous, but he drinks it anyway, sighing as though he's feasting. You try a sip and gag, but at least the warmth spreads briefly through your chest. The jokes become darker. A warrior mutters that he'd trade his axe for a sausage, and the camp laughs too loudly, the laughter edged with pain. Another says he dreams of roasted pork every night, only to wake chewing his cloak. The image is absurd, yet no one doubts it. Hunger breeds hallucinations as easily as humor. And yet, even in this misery, sharing persists. A man tears his last piece of dried fish in half, pressing the smaller portion into your hand. The salt stings your cracked lips as you swallow it, gratitude heavier than the food itself. Acts like these burn brighter than fire, even if they only fill the belly for a heartbeat. Night deepens, and hunger sharpens again. Men sleep fitfully, muttering in their dreams, reaching for phantom feasts. You lie awake, stomach twisting, mouth dry despite chewing snow. You smell smoke, leather, sweat scents that should be ordinary but now all remind you of food. The leather strap of your shield suddenly seems edible, the resinous tang in your nose tricking you into imagining roasted meat. You shake your head, ashamed, but the thought lingers. The scholars may dispute the extremity of famine tales, but you know one thing with certainty. Hunger is as fierce an enemy as any axe. It turns comrades suspicious, transforms scraps into treasure, and whispers wild thoughts into tired minds. You curl tighter under your cloak, pressing fists against your stomach, whispering that tomorrow you will eat, whether hare, pine broth, or boiled leather, you will eat. Because in these mountains hunger is patient, but so are you, and as long as you keep moving, you still have a chance to outlast it. The war band drags itself forward, thinner now, not just from hunger but from exhaustion that carves hollows into every face. The mountain punishes more than flesh, it crushes the mind. Men who once laughed at wolves and storms now mutter to themselves, eyes glassy, as though shadows in the snow whisper their names. Archaeological finds alone can't reveal the toll of despair, but sagas and chronicles hint at it. There are tales of warriors who sat down in the snow and refused to rise, not because their bodies failed, but because their will did. Monks wrote of raiders seen trudging like hollow men, their eyes vacant, their spirits eaten away by silence and cold. You feel the truth of it as you glance at comrades, whose gazes never quite meet yours anymore. And folklore adds darker color. Some stories claim men saw visions in the snow giant women of frost beckoning them, or halls of fire shimmering just out of reach. You imagine that now, a figure standing in the whiteness ahead, promising warmth if you step off the path. A trick of exhaustion, perhaps, but exhaustion is convincing. Researchers still argue about whether these visions were hallucinations from hunger, myths woven later into sagas, or deliberate poetic flourishes meant to dramatize suffering. Whatever their origin, you know the experience is real. The mountain is full of shapes and voices that do not exist, yet you see and hear them clearly. The sensory details of exhaustion sharpen in strange ways. Your legs move like wood, stiff and unresponsive. Every step is mechanical, your feet hitting the snow with dull thuds. The wind's howl no longer sounds fierce, it becomes a chorus of voices, sometimes mocking, sometimes comforting. You hear your name carried in its shrill pitch, though you know no one called it. Your mouth is dry, your tongue thick. Snow melts into bitter water on your lips, but it doesn't quench thirst. Hunger tastes metallic now, like rust, and bile rises in your throat when you try to swallow. Even the smell of smoke, once comforting, now feels oppressive, too heavy, too thick, reminding you only of meals that never come. Around you, despair shows in bodies. One man stares blankly at his hands as though surprised they still exist. Another mutters about feasts back home, listing dishes in a broken voice until he breaks into laughter that doesn't sound sane. A third keeps tugging at his cloak, adjusting it over and over, as though fabric alone could shield him from the emptiness gnawing inside. The soundscape is hollow. The steady rhythm of chants and songs that once carried you forward has died. Only groans, sighs, and the crunch of snow remain. Even laughter is rare now, surfacing awkwardly before collapsing into silence. The band feels less like a group of warriors and more like ghosts marching towards some unseen end. Yet in the midst of despair, there are sparks of resilience. A warrior begins humming again, voice shaky, but enough to remind others of the sagas told just nights ago. Another slaps his comrade on the shoulder, muttering that Odin never praised men who quit. The words are rough, unpolished, but they ripple outward, pulling a few heads higher. You yourself cling to memory as shield. You recall the feel of summer fields, the scent of salt spray at sea, the warmth of mead on your tongue. They feel distant, almost fictional, but they are yours. The visions in the snow may be lies, but your own memories are real, and they keep your legs moving when nothing else does. When camp is made, the fire feels smaller than ever. Men huddle closer, their silence oppressive. Smoke drifts upward, its pine tang sharp in your nostrils. You press your hands to the flames, letting the sting of heat remind you you're alive. The glow paints faces hollow, eyes sunken, but in each there is still a flicker of stubbornness. The scholars may debate endlessly whether Viking despair was myth or fact, but you know the truth in your bones. The mountain does not need swords to kill it, only needs silence and time. Yet you also know something else. Despair can be fought, not with steel, but with memory, ritual, laughter, and the sheer audacity of taking another step. You close your eyes, the crackle of fire filling your ears. Tomorrow will be another day of white emptiness, but you whisper to yourself, quietly, steadily. You will rise, you will march, you will not sit down in the snow. Not yet. The march stretches on, and the mountain gives no sign of ending. Snow ridges blur into one another. Valleys repeat like echoes, and the men trudge as if caught in a circle. Fatigue bends their backs. Frost sculpts their beards into white thickets, and every step feels stolen from the grave. Yet still, the band pushes forward, and something remarkable happens. Their suffering begins to weave into memory, into legend, even before the journey is done. Excavated rune stones and carved memorials tell us that Norse warriors often marked survival of difficult journeys in story and symbol. A name inscribed, a phrase praising endurance. These carved records transformed misery into honor. You can almost picture the future, someone etching words into stone declaring how this war band crossed the White Mountains and lived. Even now, the men speak in fragments that sound like sagas, half joking, half serious. And there's an odd custom hinted at in some sagas. Warriors sometimes exaggerated their own suffering, turning frostbite into proof of courage, hunger into a badge of pride. A man might boast not about how much meat he ate, but how long he survived without it. You hear such bravado around the fire tonight, one warrior chuckles that his toes are already in Valhalla, waiting for the rest of him to catch up. Laughter ripples, grim but real. Some experts question whether these boasts were genuine camaraderie or later embellishments, stories polished after survival to mask despair. Did men really laugh at their own wounds in the moment, or only once safe? The debate lingers, unresolved, though your ears tell you that even hollow laughter can be weapon enough against misery. The sensory world of legend-making is vivid. Fire sparks rise into a star-salted sky, each ember drifting upward like a prayer. The smell of smoke mingles with the rank musk of damp cloaks and sour milk, and somehow even that stench feels worthy of story. Your tongue still tastes the salt of old rations, bitter and thin, but in the rhythm of boasts it almost sweetens into triumph. Sound dominates the night. Men's voices weave into a chorus, not of song this time, but of stories told half seriously. How one slipped on ice and claimed it was Thor himself knocking him down, how another swore the wolves bowed to him before vanishing. The laughter that follows is sharp, edged with exhaustion, but it binds the group together like a rope. Even gestures become legend. A warrior lifts his scarred hand toward the flames, palm cracked and bleeding, declaring it proof of the mountain's jealousy. Another thumps his chest, claiming his hunger has carved him into a finer man than any feast could. You know it's bravado, but it works. The firelight flickers, faces gleam, and for a moment you feel less like survivors and more like heroes rehearsing their saga. You sip thin broth, the taste mostly ash, and yet you swallow it as though it were feast meat. Hunger makes every bite precious, but story makes it almost sacred. Around you, men nod solemnly after each jest, their eyes brighter, their shoulders squarer. You realize then that storytelling is not just memory, it is armor. It transforms misery into meaning, turning every blister and cough into proof of endurance. The night deepens, wind howling around the shield wall, shadows dance, fire sputters, and still the boasting continues. Some tales are absurd claims of wrestling bears, of drinking melted snow like mead from Odin's horn. You laugh, not because you believe, but because disbelief is irrelevant. The point is not truth, the point is survival. And when silence finally returns, it carries weight. The fire pops, smoke curls, and men lie back against shields, faces calmer. You feel the warmth of your cloak, stiff with frost but comforting, and realize something profound. Suffering alone is torment, but shared suffering becomes story. And story is what will carry you through the next day, and the next. Scholars may argue forever about what is real and what is embellishment, but here, sitting among frostbitten comrades spinning sagas out of hunger, you know truth in its rawest form. Pain endures, yes, but so does the voice that tells it, and that voice is stronger than the mountain. You close your eyes, the taste of smoke still on your tongue, the sound of laughter echoing faintly in your ears. Tomorrow the snow will rise again, but tonight you sleep, knowing you are already part of a story that will outlive the cold. The final stretch of the march rises before you, like a wall sheer slopes, icy winds, and ridges that seem to climb into the clouds themselves. Your body is nearly hollow, your stomach long past growling, your feet little more than aching lumps of frost. Yet something stirs inside you, a quiet knowledge that the ordeal is almost done. The mountain may not care, but you do. Each step becomes both punishment and promise. Archaeological and textual evidence agrees that Viking war bands often pushed themselves beyond reason, covering immense distances in hostile terrain. Some inscriptions even brag of marches so long and brutal that men shed their skins in frost. You feel the truth of that now. Your cloak is stiff, your beard thick with ice, your very skin cracked and bleeding. You are shedding yourself, piece by piece, yet still moving. And there is a strange tidbit in saga literature. Men were said to test one another at the journey's end, daring comrades to carry stones or strike shields, just to prove they had strength left. You watch as one warrior, too exhausted to laugh, still thumps his shield with a fist, sparks of defiance glowing in his eyes. It is absurd proving strength when strength is gone, but the absurdity itself feels like triumph. Academics still argue about the accuracy of such final displays. Were they ritual, bravado, or later embellishments? Perhaps a little of each. Yet you know from the ache in your bones that even the weakest boast can keep a man upright when the snow wants to swallow him whole. The sensory world of this last climb is unforgettable. Wind screams in your ears, tearing words away before they're spoken. Your mouth tastes of iron, blood from cracked lips mixing with the metallic bite of the air. The smell is sharp and clean, nothing but snow and stone, as though the mountain has stripped every other scent away. Your vision blurs with white and grey, shapes indistinct, but the line of comrades ahead keeps you tethered. Each footstep is a negotiation. Snow crunches loudly under your boots, then gives way, plunging you knee-deep, ripping curses from your throat. Your shield bangs against your back, numb shoulders barely feeling it anymore. The rope tied between some of the men tugs at your waist, a reminder that no one climbs this alone. The fire that night is the smallest yet. Wood is scarce, fuel nearly gone, and the flames lick low and weak. But men huddle close anyway, eyes reflecting orange sparks. The sound of chewing is quieter too, only scraps left to gnaw. And yet voices rise soft, steady, telling once more the stories that have carried you this far. You feel the weight of every sense. Smoke clings to your hair, sweat freezes on your neck, your breath rasps painfully in your chest. Your toes burn with returning blood when held near the embers, and the pain is so sharp you bite your cloak to keep from crying out. Around you, others do the same, muffled groans and whispered curses forming a grim chorus. And then silence falls. Men lie back, cloaks wrapped tight, shields tucked close. You stare at the stars above, sharper than you've ever seen them, scattered like runes across black sky. They seem to whisper that the march is ending, that you have survived what should have killed you. The thought feels both fragile and profound. The scholars may never settle every question: how much food was eaten, which rituals were real, what visions were truth or poetry. But none of that matters to you now. What matters is that you endured. You carried the shield when it cut your shoulder raw. You chewed bark-tough bread when your stomach screamed. You sang when silence pressed too heavily. You did not lie down in the snow and surrender. And so the story ends not in battle, but in survival. You have not conquered the mountain. You have merely lived through it. Yet that is victory enough. The fire burns lower, shadows lengthen, and your eyelids grow heavy. The march is behind you now, though your body still trembles with its memory. You let your breath slow, deep and even, matching the soft hiss of embers. Each inhale tastes faintly of smoke and pine. Each exhale drifts like mist into the cold night. Your thoughts soften too. No more shields slamming against your back. No more wolves pacing in the dark. No more hollow ache of hunger twisting your belly. All of it fades into distance, like footprints swallowed by fresh snow. What remains is the quiet truth. You endured, step by step, hour by hour, until the mountains themselves released you. The stars above blur into gentle light, no longer harsh or sharp but soft, like lanterns hung in the sky to guide you home. You close your eyes and see them still, etched on the inside of your lids, steady and calm. The wind that once cut your face now brushes like a hand smoothing your brow. Your body unwinds at last. Toes loosen inside their boots, fingers uncurl, shoulders sink into the cloak that cradles you. Pain dulls into memory, and memory dulls into nothing more than story. You are safe. You are warm. You are finished with the march. Let sleep come now, slow and deep. Let the mountains fade into dream, their white silence replaced by gentle darkness. Tomorrow, no trudging, no hunger, no fear, only rest. You have survived the winter's teeth, and that survival is enough. Good night, traveler. Sweet dreams.